1 Kings chapter 1. Now King David was old and well along in years, and though they covered him with blankets, he could not keep warm. So his servants said to him, "Let us search for a young virgin for our lord the king, to attend to him and care for him and lie by his side to keep him warm." Then they searched throughout Israel for a beautiful girl, and they found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. The girl was unsurpassed in beauty. She cared for the king and served him, but he had no relations with her. At that time Adonijah, David's son by Haggith, began to exalt himself, saying, "I will be king." And he acquired chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run ahead of him. His father had never once reprimanded him by saying, "Why do you act this way?" Adonijah was also very handsome, born next after Absalom. So Adonijah conferred with Joab son of Zeruiah and with Abiathar the priest, who supported him. But Zadok the priest, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, Nathan the prophet, Shimei, Rei, and David's mighty men would not join Adonijah. And Adonijah sacrificed sheep, oxen, and fattened calves near the stone of Zoheleth, which is next to Enrogel. He invited all his royal brothers and all the men of Judah who were servants of the king. But he did not invite Nathan the prophet, Benaiah, the mighty men, or his brother Solomon. Then Nathan said to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, "Have you not heard that Adonijah son of Haggith has become king, and our lord David does not know it? Now please, come and let me advise you. Save your own life and the life of your son Solomon. Go at once to King David and say, 'My lord the king, did you not swear to your maidservant, surely your son Solomon will reign after me, and he will sit on my throne? Why then has Adonijah become king? Then, while you are still there speaking with the king, I will come in after you and confirm your words.'" So Bathsheba went to see the king in his bedroom. Since the king was very old, Abishag the Shunammite was serving him. And Bathsheba bowed down in homage to the king, who asked, "What is your desire?" "My lord," she replied, "you yourself swore to your maidservant by the Lord your God, 'Surely your son Solomon will reign after me, and he will sit on my throne.' But now, behold, Adonijah has become king, and you, my lord the king, did not know it. And he has sacrificed an abundance of oxen, fattened calves, and sheep, and has invited all the other sons of the king, as well as Abiathar the priest and Joab the commander of the army. But he did not invite your servant Solomon. And as for you, my lord the king, the eyes of all Israel are upon you to tell them who will sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. Otherwise, when my lord the king rests with his fathers, I and my son Solomon will be counted as criminals." And just then, while Bathsheba was still speaking with the king, Nathan the prophet arrived. So the king was told, "Nathan the prophet is here." And Nathan went in and bowed face down before the king. "My lord the king," said Nathan, "did you say, 'Adonijah will reign after me, and he will sit on my throne'? For today he has gone down and sacrificed an abundance of oxen, fattened calves, and sheep, and has invited all the sons of the king, the commanders of the army, and Abiathar the priest. And behold, they are eating and drinking before him, saying, 'Long live King Adonijah.' But me, your servant, he did not invite, nor Zadok the priest, nor Benaiah son of Jehoiada, nor your servant Solomon. Has my lord the king let this happen without informing your servant who should sit on the throne after my lord the king?" Then King David said, "Call in Bathsheba for me." So she came into the king's presence and stood before him. And the king swore an oath, saying, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all distress, I will carry out this very day exactly what I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel. Surely your son Solomon will reign after me, and he will sit on my throne in my place." Bathsheba bowed face down in homage to the king and said, "May my lord King David live forever." Then King David said, "Call in for me Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada." So they came before the king. "Take my servants with you," said the king. "Set my son Solomon on my own mule, and take him down to Gihon. There Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet are to anoint him king over Israel. You are to blow the ram's horn and declare, 'Long live King Solomon.' Then you shall go up with him, and he is to come and sit on my throne and reign in my place, for I have appointed him ruler over Israel and Judah." "Amen," replied Benaiah son of Jehoiada. "May the Lord, the God of my lord the king, so declare it." Just as the Lord was with my lord the king, so may he be with Solomon, and make his throne even greater than that of my lord King David." Then Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada, along with the Kerethites and Pelethites, went down and set Solomon on King David's mule, and they escorted him to Gihon. Zadok the priest took the horn of oil from the tabernacle and anointed Solomon. Then they blew the ram's horn, and all the people proclaimed, "Long live King Solomon!" All the people followed him, playing flutes and rejoicing with such a great joy that the earth was split by the sound. Now Adonijah and his guests were finishing their feast when they heard the sound of the ram's horn. "Why is the city in such a loud uproar?" asked Joab. As he was speaking, suddenly Jonathan the son of Abiathar the priest arrived. "Come in," said Adonijah, "for you are a man of valor. You must be bringing good news." "Not at all," Jonathan replied. "Our lord King David has made Solomon king, and with Solomon the king has sent Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada, along with the Kerethites and Pelethites, and they have set him on the king's mule. Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet have anointed him king at Gihon, and they have gone up from there with rejoicing that rings out in the city. That is the noise you hear. Moreover, Solomon has taken his seat on the royal throne. The king's servants have also gone to congratulate our lord King David, saying, 'May your God make the name of Solomon more famous than your own name, and may he make his throne greater than your throne.' And the king has bowed in worship on his bed, saying, 'Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel. Today he has provided one to sit on my throne, and my eyes have seen it.' At this all the guests of Adonijah arose in terror and scattered. But Adonijah, in fear of Solomon, got up and went to take hold of the horns of the altar. It was reported to Solomon, 'Behold, Adonijah fears King Solomon, and he has taken hold of the horns of the altar, saying, Let King Solomon first swear to me not to put his servant to the sword.' And Solomon replied, 'If he is a man of character, not a single hair of his will fall to the ground, but if evil is found in him, he will die.' So King Solomon summoned Adonijah down from the altar, and he came and bowed down before King Solomon, who said to him, 'Go to your home.'" 1 Kings chapter 2. As the time drew near for David to die, he charged his son Solomon, "I am about to go the way of all the earth. So be strong and prove yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God to walk in his ways, and to keep his statutes, commandments, ordinances, and decrees, as is written in the law of Moses, so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you turn, and so that the Lord may fulfill his promise to me. If your descendants take heed to walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. Moreover, you know what Joab son of Zeruiah did to me, what he did to Abner son of Ner and Amasa son of Jether, the two commanders of the armies of Israel. He killed them in peacetime to avenge the blood of war. He stained with the blood of war the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. So act according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray head go down to Sheol in peace. But show loving devotion to the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table, because they stood by me when I fled from your brother Absalom. Keep an eye on Shimei the son of Gera, the Benjamite from Behurim, who is with you. He called down bitter curses against me on the day I went to Mahanaim. But when he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will never put you to the sword. Now therefore, do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man. You know what you ought to do to him to bring his gray head down to Sheol in blood." Then David rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The length of David's reign over Israel was 40 years, 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. Now Adonijah son of Haggith went to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, and she asked, "Do you come in peace?" "Yes, in peace," he replied. Then he said, "I have something to tell you." "Say it," she answered. "You know that the kingship was mine," he said. "All Israel expected that I should reign, but the kingship is turned to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord. So now I have just one request of you. Do not deny me." "State your request," she told him. Adonijah replied, "Please speak to King Solomon, since he will not turn you down. Let him give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife." "Very well," Bathsheba replied, "I will speak to the king for you." So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah. The king stood up to greet her, bowed to her, and sat down on his throne. Then the king had a throne brought for his mother, who sat down at his right hand. "I have just one small request of you," she said. "Do not deny me." "Make your request, my mother," the king replied, "for I will not deny you." So Bathsheba said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given to your brother Adonijah as his wife." King Solomon answered his mother, "Why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Since he is my older brother, you might as well request the kingdom for him and for Abiathar the priest and for Joab son of Zeruiah." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, "May God punish me and ever so severely if Adonijah has not made this request at the expense of his life. And now, as surely as the Lord lives, the one who established me, who set me on the throne of my father David, and who founded for me a dynasty as he promised, surely Adonijah shall be put to death today." So King Solomon sent the order to Benaiah son of Jehoiada, who struck down Adonijah, and he died. Then the king said to Abiathar the priest, "Go back to your fields in Anathoth. Even though you deserve to die, I will not put you to death at this time, since you carried the ark of the Lord God before my father David, and you suffered through all that my father suffered." So Solomon banished Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, and thus fulfilled the word that the Lord had spoken at Shiloh against the house of Eli. When the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah, but not with Absalom, he fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. It was reported to King Solomon, "Joab has fled to the tent of the Lord and is now beside the altar." So Solomon sent Benaiah son of Jehoiada, saying, "Go, strike him down." And Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, "The king says, 'Come out.'" But Joab replied, "No, I will die here." So Benaiah relayed the message to the king, saying, "This is how Joab answered me." And the king replied, "Do just as he says. Strike him down and bury him, and so remove from me and from the house of my father the innocent blood that Joab shed. The Lord will bring his bloodshed back upon his own head, for without the knowledge of my father David he struck down 2 men more righteous and better than he when he put to the sword Abner son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa son of Jether, commander of Judah's army. Their blood will come back upon the heads of Joab and his descendants forever. But for David, his descendants, his house, and his throne, there shall be peace from the Lord forever." So Benaiah son of Jehoiada went up, struck down Joab, and killed him. He was buried at his own home in the wilderness. And the king appointed Benaiah son of Jehoiada in Joab's place over the army, and he appointed Zadok the priest in Abiathar's place. Then the king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Build a house for yourself in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else. On the day you go out and cross the Kidron Valley, know for sure that you will die. Your blood will be on your own head." "The sentence is fair," Shimei replied. "Your servant will do as my lord the king has spoken." And Shimei lived in Jerusalem for a long time. After 3 years, however, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran away to Achish son of Maacah, king of Gath. And Shimei was told, "Look, your slaves are in Gath." So Shimei saddled his donkey and set out to Achish at Gath in search of his slaves, and he brought them back from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned, the king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you, on the day you leave and go elsewhere, know for sure that you will die? And you told me, 'The sentence is fair, I will comply.' So why have you not kept your oath to the Lord and the command that I gave you?" The king also said, "You know in your heart all the evil that you did to my father David. Therefore the Lord will bring your evil back upon your head. But King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne will remain secure before the Lord forever." Then the king commanded Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. Thus the kingdom was firmly established in the hand of Solomon. 1 Kings chapter 3. Later, Solomon formed an alliance with Pharaoh king of Egypt by marrying his daughter. Solomon brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his palace and the house of the Lord, as well as the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing on the high places because a house for the name of the Lord had not yet been built. And Solomon loved the Lord and walked in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. Now the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for it was the great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar there. One night at Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, "Ask, and I will give it to you." Solomon replied, "You have shown much loving devotion to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness, righteousness, and uprightness of heart. And you have maintained this loving devotion by giving him a son to sit on his throne this very day. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in my father David's place. But I am only a little child, not knowing how to go out or come in. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a people too numerous to count or number. Therefore, give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people and to discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" Now it pleased the Lord that Solomon had made this request. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this instead of requesting long life or wealth for yourself or death for your enemies, but you have asked for discernment to administer justice, behold, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there has never been nor will ever be another like you. Moreover, I will give you what you did not request, both riches and honor, so that during all your days no man in any kingdom will be your equal. So if you walk in my ways and keep my statutes and commandments, just as your father David did, I will prolong your days." Then Solomon awoke, and indeed it had been a dream. So he returned to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. Then he held a feast for all his servants. At that time 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. One woman said, "Please, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. On the 3rd day after I gave birth, this woman also had a baby. We were alone, with no one in the house but the 2 of us. During the night this woman's son died because she rolled over on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I was asleep. She laid him in her bosom and put her dead son at my bosom. The next morning when I got up to nurse my son, I discovered he was dead. But when I examined him, I realized that he was not the son I had born." "No," said the other woman, "the living one is my son, and the dead one is your son." But the first woman insisted, "No, the dead one is yours, and the living one is mine." So they argued before the king. Then the king replied, "This woman says, 'My son is alive and yours is dead,' but that woman says, 'No, your son is dead and mine is alive.'" The king continued, "Bring me a sword." So they brought him a sword. And the king declared, "Cut the living child in 2 and give half to one and half to the other." Then the woman whose son was alive spoke to the king because she yearned with compassion for her son. "Please, my lord," she said, "give her the living baby. Do not kill him." But the other woman said, "He will be neither mine nor yours. Cut him in 2. Then the king gave his ruling. "Give the living baby to the first woman. By no means should you kill him. She is his mother." When all Israel heard of the judgment the king had given, they stood in awe of him, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. 1 Kings chapter 4. So King Solomon ruled over Israel, and these were his chief officials. Azariah son of Zadok was the priest. Elihoreph and Ahijah, the sons of Shisha, were secretaries. Jehoshaphat son of Ahilud was the recorder. Benaiah son of Jehoiada was in charge of the army. Zadok and Abiathar were priests. Azariah son of Nathan was in charge of the governors. Zabud son of Nathan was a priest and advisor to the king. Ahishar was in charge of the palace, and Adoniram son of Abda was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 12 governors over all Israel to provide food for the king and his household. Each one would arrange provisions for 1 month of the year, and these were their names: Ben-Hur in the hill country of Ephraim, Ben-Deker in Makaz, in Shaalbim, in Beth-Shemesh, and in Elon Beth-Hanan. Ben-Hesed in Arubboth, Soko, and all the land of Hepher belonged to him. Ben-Abinadab in Naphath Dor. Taphath, a daughter of Solomon, was his wife. Baana son of Elihud in Taanach, in Megiddo, and in all of Bethshean next to Zarethan below Jezreel, from Bethshean to Abel-Meholah, and on past Jokmeam. Ben-Geber in Ramoth-Gilead, the villages of Jair son of Manasseh in Gilead belonged to him, as well as the region of Argob in Bashan with its 60 great cities with walls and bronze bars. Ahinadab son of Iddo in Mahanaim. Ahimaaz in Naphtali, he had married Basemath, a daughter of Solomon. Baana son of Hushai in Asher and in Aloth. Jehoshaphat son of Peruah in Issachar. Shimei son of Elah in Benjamin. Geber son of Uri in the land of Gilead, including the territories of Sihon king of the Amorites and of Og king of Bashan. There was also one governor in the land of Judah. The people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand on the seashore, and they were eating and drinking and rejoicing. And Solomon reigned over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines, as far as the border of Egypt. These kingdoms offered tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Solomon's provisions for a single day were 30 cors of fine flour, 60 cors of meal, 10 fat oxen, 20 range oxen, and 100 sheep, as well as deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fattened poultry. For Solomon had dominion over everything west of the Euphrates, over all the kingdoms from Tiphsah to Gaza, and he had peace on all sides. Throughout the days of Solomon, Judah and Israel dwelt securely from Dan to Beersheba, each man under his own vine and his own fig tree. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for his chariot horses and 12,000 horses. Each month the governors in turn provided food for King Solomon and all who came to his table. They saw to it that nothing was lacking. Each one also brought to the required place their quotas of barley and straw for the chariot horses and other horses. And God gave Solomon wisdom, exceedingly deep insight, and understanding beyond measure, like the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than that of all the men of the East, greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than all men, wiser than Ethan the Ezrahite, and wiser than Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol. And his fame spread throughout the surrounding nations. Solomon composed 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He spoke of trees, from the cedar in Lebanon to the hyssop growing in the wall, and he taught about animals, birds, reptiles, and fish. So men of all nations came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. 1 Kings chapter 5. Now when Hiram king of Tyre heard that Solomon had been anointed king in his father's place, he sent envoys to Solomon, for Hiram had always been a friend of David. And Solomon relayed this message to Hiram: As you are well aware, due to the wars waged on all sides against my father David, he could not build a house for the name of the Lord his God until the Lord had put his enemies under his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side, and there is no adversary or crisis. So behold, I plan to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, according to what the Lord said to my father David. I will put your son on your throne in your place, and he will build the house for my name. Now therefore, order that cedars of Lebanon be cut down for me. My servants will be with your servants, and I will pay your servants whatever wages you set, for you know that there are none among us as skilled in logging as the Sidonians. When Hiram received Solomon's message, he rejoiced greatly and said, Blessed be the Lord this day. He has given David a wise son over this great people. Then Hiram sent a reply to Solomon, saying, I have received your message. I will do all you desire regarding the cedar and cypress timber. My servants will haul the logs from Lebanon to the sea, and I will float them as rafts by sea to the place you specify. There I will separate the logs, and you can take them away. And in exchange you can meet my needs by providing my household with food. So Hiram provided Solomon with all the cedar and cypress timber he wanted, and year after year Solomon would provide Hiram with 20,000 cors of wheat as food for his household, as well as 20,000 baths of pure olive oil. And the Lord gave Solomon wisdom, as he had promised him. There was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. Then King Solomon conscripted a labor force of 30,000 men from all Israel. He sent them to Lebanon in monthly shifts of 10,000 men, so that they would spend 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home, and Adoniram was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 70,000 porters and 80,000 stone cutters in the mountains, not including his 3,300 foremen who supervised the workers. And the king commanded them to quarry large costly stones to lay the foundation of the temple with dressed stones. So Solomon's and Hiram's builders, along with the Gebalites, quarried the stone and prepared the timber and stone for the construction of the temple. 1 Kings chapter 6. In the 480th year after the Israelites had come out of the land of Egypt, in the month of Ziv, the second month of the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, he began to build the house of the Lord. The house that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. The portico at the front of the main hall of the temple was 20 cubits long, extending across the width of the temple and projecting out 10 cubits in front of the temple. He also had narrow windows framed high in the temple. Against the walls of the temple and the inner sanctuary, Solomon built a chambered structure around the temple, in which he constructed the side rooms. The bottom floor was 5 cubits wide, the middle floor 6 cubits, and the third floor 7 cubits. He also placed offset ledges around the outside of the temple so that nothing would be inserted into its walls. The temple was constructed using finished stones cut at the quarry so that no hammer or chisel or any other iron tool was heard in the temple while it was being built. The entrance to the bottom floor was on the south side of the temple. A stairway led up to the middle level and from there to the third floor. So Solomon built the temple and finished it, roofing it with beams and planks of cedar. He built chambers all along the temple, each 5 cubits high, and attached to the temple with beams of cedar. Then the word of the Lord came to Solomon, saying, As for this temple you are building, if you walk in my statutes, carry out my ordinances, and keep all my commandments by walking in them, I will fulfill through you the promise I made to your father David, and I will dwell among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel. So Solomon built the temple and finished it. He lined the interior walls with cedar paneling from the floor of the temple to the ceiling, and he covered the floor with cypress boards. He partitioned off the 20 cubits at the rear of the temple with cedar boards from floor to ceiling to form within the temple an inner sanctuary, the most holy place. And the main hall in front of this room was 40 cubits long. The cedar paneling inside the temple was carved with gourds and open flowers. Everything was cedar, not a stone could be seen. Solomon also prepared the inner sanctuary within the temple to set the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord there. The inner sanctuary was 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 20 cubits high. He overlaid the inside with pure gold, and he also overlaid the altar of cedar. So Solomon overlaid the inside of the temple with pure gold, and he extended gold chains across the front of the inner sanctuary, which was overlaid with gold. So he overlaid with gold the whole interior of the temple until everything was completely finished. He also overlaid with gold the entire altar that belonged to the inner sanctuary. In the inner sanctuary he made 2 cherubim, each 10 cubits high, out of olive wood. One wing of the first cherub was 5 cubits long, and the other wing was 5 cubits long as well. So the full wingspan was 10 cubits. The second cherub also measured 10 cubits. Both cherubim had the same size and shape, and the height of each cherub was 10 cubits. And he placed the cherubim inside the innermost room of the temple. Since their wings were spread out, the wing of the first cherub touched one wall, while the wing of the second cherub touched the other wall. And in the middle of the room their wing tips touched. He also overlaid the cherubim with gold. Then he carved the walls all around the temple in both the inner and outer sanctuaries with carved engravings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. And he overlaid the temple floor with gold in both the inner and outer sanctuaries. For the entrance to the inner sanctuary, Solomon constructed doors of olive wood with 5-sided doorposts. The double doors were made of olive wood, and he carved into them cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and overlaid the cherubim and palm trees with hammered gold. In the same way he made 4-sided doorposts of olive wood for the sanctuary entrance. The 2 doors were made of cypress wood, and each had 2 folding panels. He carved into them cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and he overlaid them with gold, hammered evenly over the carvings. Solomon built the inner courtyard with 3 rows of dressed stone and 1 row of trimmed cedar beams. The foundation of the house of the Lord was laid in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, in the month of Ziv. In his 11th year and 8th month, the month of Bul, the temple was finished in every detail and according to every specification. So he built the temple in 7 years. 1 Kings chapter 7. Solomon, however, took 13 years to complete the construction of his entire palace. He built the house of the forest of Lebanon 100 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, with 4 rows of cedar pillars supporting the cedar beams. The house was roofed with cedar above the beams that rested on the pillars, 45 beams, 15 per row. There were 3 rows of high windows facing one another in 3 tiers. All the doorways had rectangular frames with the openings facing one another in 3 tiers. Solomon made his colonnade 50 cubits long and 30 cubits wide, with a portico in front of it and a canopy with pillars in front of the portico. In addition, he built a hall for the throne, the Hall of Justice, where he was to judge. It was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. And the palace where Solomon would live, set further back, was of similar construction. He also made a palace like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married. All these buildings were constructed with costly stones, cut to size and trimmed with saws inside and out from the foundation to the eaves, and from the outside to the great courtyard. The foundations were laid with large, costly stones, some 10 cubits long and some 8 cubits long. Above these were high-grade stones cut to size and cedar beams. The great courtyard was surrounded by 3 rows of dressed stone and a row of trimmed cedar beams, as were the inner courtyard and portico of the house of the Lord. Now King Solomon sent to bring Huram from Tyre. He was the son of a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a craftsman in bronze. Huram had great skill, understanding, and knowledge for every kind of bronze work. So he came to King Solomon and carried out all his work. He cast 2 pillars of bronze, each 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in circumference. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on top of the pillars, each capital 5 cubits high. For the capitals on top of the pillars he made a network of lattice with wreaths of chainwork, 7 for each capital. Likewise, he made the pillars with 2 rows of pomegranates around each grating to cover each capital atop the pillars. And the capitals atop the pillars in the portico were shaped like lilies, 4 cubits high. On the capitals of both pillars, just above the rounded projection next to the network, were the 200 pomegranates in rows encircling each capital. Thus he set up the pillars at the portico of the temple. The pillar to the south he named Jachin, and the pillar to the north he named Boaz. And the tops of the pillars were shaped like lilies, so the work of the pillars was completed. He also made the sea of cast metal. It was circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim, 5 cubits in height and 30 cubits in circumference. Below the rim, ornamental buds encircled it, 10 per cubit all the way around the sea, cast in 2 rows as a part of the sea. The sea stood on 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea rested on them with all their hindquarters toward the center. It was a handbreadth thick, and its rim was fashioned like the brim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It could hold 2,000 baths. In addition, he made 10 movable stands of bronze, each 4 cubits long, 4 cubits wide, and 3 cubits high. This was the design of the stands. They had side panels attached to uprights, and on the panels between the uprights were lions, oxen, and cherubim. On the uprights was a pedestal above, and below the lions and oxen were wreaths of beveled work. Each stand had 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles and a basin resting on 4 supports with wreaths on each side. The opening to each stand inside the crown at the top was 1 cubit deep, with a round opening like the design of a pedestal, 1.5 cubits wide. And around its opening were engravings, but the panels of the stands were square, not round. There were 4 wheels under the panels, and the axles of the wheels were attached to the stand. Each wheel was 1.5 cubits in diameter. The wheels were made like chariot wheels. Their axles, rims, spokes, and hubs were all of cast metal. Each stand had 4 handles, 1 for each corner, projecting from the stand. At the top of each stand was a circular band half a cubit high. The supports and panels were cast as a unit with the top of the stand. He engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees on the surfaces of the supports and panels, wherever each had space, with wreaths all around. In this way he made the 10 stands, each with the same casting, dimensions, and shape. He also made 10 bronze basins, each holding 40 baths and measuring 4 cubits across, 1 basin for each of the 10 stands. He set 5 stands on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north, and he put the sea on the south side at the southeast corner of the temple. Additionally, Huram made the pots, shovels, and sprinkling bowls. So Huram finished all the work that he had undertaken for King Solomon in the house of the Lord: the 2 pillars, the 2 bowl-shaped capitals atop the pillars, the 2 sets of network covering both bowls of the capitals atop the pillars, the 400 pomegranates for the 2 sets of network, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network covering both the bowl-shaped capitals atop the pillars, the 10 stands, the 10 basins on the stands, the sea, the 12 oxen underneath the sea, and the pots, shovels, and sprinkling bowls. All the articles that Huram made for King Solomon in the house of the Lord were made of burnished bronze. The king had them cast in clay molds in the plain of the Jordan beyond Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon left all these articles unweighed because there were so many. The weight of the bronze could not be determined. Solomon also made all the furnishings for the house of the Lord: the golden altar, the golden table on which was placed the bread of the presence, the lampstands of pure gold in front of the inner sanctuary, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, the gold flowers, lamps, and tongs, the pure gold basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, ladles, and censers, and the gold hinges for the doors of the inner temple, that is, the most holy place, as well as for the doors of the main hall of the temple. So all the work that King Solomon had performed for the house of the Lord was completed. Then Solomon brought in the items his father David had dedicated, the silver, the gold, and the furnishings, and he placed them in the treasuries of the house of the Lord. 1 Kings chapter 8. At that time Solomon assembled before him in Jerusalem the elders of Israel, all the tribal heads and family leaders of the Israelites, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord from Zion, the city of David. And all the men of Israel came together to King Solomon at the feast in the 7th month, the month of Ethanim. When all the elders of Israel had arrived, the priests took up the ark, and they brought up the ark of the Lord and the tent of meeting with all its sacred furnishings. So the priests and Levites carried them up. There, before the ark, King Solomon and the whole congregation of Israel who had assembled with him sacrificed so many sheep and oxen that they could not be counted or numbered. Then the priests brought the ark of the covenant of the Lord to its place in the inner sanctuary of the temple, the most holy place, beneath the wings of the cherubim. For the cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark and overshadowed the ark and its poles. The poles extended far enough that their ends were visible from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but not from outside the holy place, and they are there to this day. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 stone tablets that Moses had placed in it at Horeb, where the Lord had made a covenant with the Israelites after they had come out of the land of Egypt. And when the priests came out of the holy place, the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand there to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. Then Solomon declared, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in the thick cloud. I have indeed built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell forever." And as the whole assembly of Israel stood there, the king turned around and blessed them all and said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who has fulfilled with his own hand what he spoke with his mouth to my father David, saying, 'Since the day I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I have not chosen a city from any tribe of Israel in which to build a house so that my name would be there, but I have chosen David to be over my people Israel.' Now it was in the heart of my father David to build a house for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. But the Lord said to my father David, 'Since it was in your heart to build a house for my name, you have done well to have this in your heart. Nevertheless, you are not the one to build it, but your son, your own offspring, will build the house for my name.' Now the Lord has fulfilled the word that he spoke. I have succeeded my father David, and I sit on the throne of Israel, as the Lord promised. I have built the house for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. And there I have provided a place for the ark which contains the covenant of the Lord that he made with our fathers when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in front of the whole assembly of Israel, spread out his hands toward heaven, and said, O Lord, God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below, keeping your covenant of loving devotion with your servants who walk before you with all their hearts. You have kept your promise to your servant, my father David. What you spoke with your mouth, you have fulfilled with your hand this day. Therefore now, O Lord, God of Israel, keep for your servant, my father David, what you promised when you said, You will never fail to have a man to sit before me on the throne of Israel, if only your descendants guard their way to walk before me as you have done. And now, O God of Israel, please confirm what you promised to your servant, my father David. But will God indeed dwell upon the earth? Even heaven, the highest heaven, cannot contain you, much less this temple I have built. Yet regard the prayer and plea of your servant, O Lord my God, so that you may hear the cry and the prayer that your servant is praying before you today. May your eyes be open toward this temple night and day, toward the place of which you said, My name shall be there, so that you may hear the prayer that your servant prays toward this place. Hear the plea of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place. May you hear from heaven, your dwelling place. May you hear and forgive. When a man sins against his neighbor and is required to take an oath, and he comes to take an oath before your altar in this temple, then may you hear from heaven and act. May you judge your servants, condemning the wicked man by bringing down on his own head what he has done, and justifying the righteous man by rewarding him according to his righteousness. When your people Israel are defeated before an enemy because they have sinned against you, and they return to you and confess your name, praying and pleading with you in this temple, then may you hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your people Israel. May you restore them to the land you gave to their fathers. When the skies are shut and there is no rain because your people have sinned against you, and they pray toward this place and confess your name, and they turn from their sins because you have afflicted them, then may you hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your servants, your people Israel, so that you may teach them the good way in which they should walk. May you send rain on the land that you gave your people as an inheritance. When famine or plague comes upon the land, or blight or mildew or locusts or grasshoppers, or when their enemy besieges them in their cities, whatever plague or sickness may come, then may whatever prayer or petition your people Israel make, each knowing his own afflictions and spreading out his hands toward this temple, be heard by you from heaven, your dwelling place. And may you forgive and act and repay each man according to all his ways, since you know his heart. For you alone know the hearts of all men, so that they may fear you all the days they live in the land that you gave to our fathers. And as for the foreigner who is not of your people Israel, but has come from a distant land because of your name, for they will hear of your great name and mighty hand and outstretched arm, when he comes and prays toward this temple, then may you hear from heaven, your dwelling place, and do according to all for which the foreigner calls to you. Then all the peoples of the earth will know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and they will know that this house I have built is called by your name. When your people go to war against their enemies, wherever you send them, and when they pray to the Lord in the direction of the city you have chosen and the house I have built for your name, then may you hear from heaven their prayer and their plea, and may you uphold their cause. When they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, and you become angry with them and deliver them to an enemy who takes them as captives to his own land, whether far or near, and when they come to their senses in the land to which they were taken, and they repent and plead with you in the land of their captors, saying, We have sinned and done wrong, we have acted wickedly, and when they return to you with all their heart and soul in the land of the enemies who took them captive, and when they pray to you in the direction of the land that you gave to their fathers, the city you have chosen, and the house I have built for your name, then may you hear from heaven, your dwelling place, their prayer and petition, and may you uphold their cause. May you forgive your people who have sinned against you and all the transgressions they have committed against you, and may you grant them compassion in the eyes of their captors to show them mercy. For they are your people and your inheritance. You brought them out of Egypt, out of the furnace for iron. May your eyes be open to the pleas of your servant and of your people Israel, and may you listen to them whenever they call to you. For you, O Lord God, as your inheritance, have set them apart from all the peoples of the earth, as you spoke through your servant Moses, when you brought our fathers out of Egypt. Now when Solomon had finished praying this entire prayer and petition to the Lord, he got up before the altar of the Lord, where he had been kneeling with his hands spread out toward heaven. And he stood and blessed the whole assembly of Israel in a loud voice, saying, Blessed be the Lord who has given rest to his people Israel according to all that he promised. Not one word has failed of all the good promises he made through his servant Moses. May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our fathers. May he never leave us nor forsake us. May he incline our hearts to himself to walk in all his ways and to keep the commandments and statutes and ordinances he commanded our fathers. And may these words with which I have made my petition before the Lord be near to the Lord our God day and night, so that he may uphold the cause of his servant and of his people Israel as each day requires, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God, there is no other. So let your heart be fully devoted to the Lord our God, as it is this day, to walk in his statutes and to keep his commandments. Then the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before the Lord. And Solomon offered as peace offerings to the Lord 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the Israelites dedicated the house of the Lord. On that same day the king consecrated the middle of the courtyard in front of the house of the Lord, and there he offered the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, and the fat of the peace offerings, since the bronze altar before the Lord was too small to contain all these offerings. So at that time Solomon and all Israel with him, a great assembly of people from Lebo-Hamath to the brook of Egypt, kept the feast before the Lord our God for 7 days and 7 more days, 14 days in all. On the 15th day Solomon sent the people away. So they blessed the king and went home, joyful and glad in heart for all the good things that the Lord had done for his servant David and for his people Israel. 1 Kings chapter 9. Now when Solomon had finished building the house of the Lord and the royal palace, and had achieved all that he had desired to do, the Lord appeared to him a second time as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. And the Lord said to him, I have heard your prayer and petition before me. I have consecrated this temple you have built by putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will be there for all time. And as for you, if you walk before me as your father David walked, with a heart of integrity and uprightness, doing all I have commanded you, and if you keep my statutes and ordinances, then I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised your father David when I said, You will never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. But if indeed you or your sons turn away from following me and do not keep the commandments and statutes I have set before you, and if you go off to serve and worship other gods, then I will cut off Israel from the land that I have given them, and I will banish from my presence this temple I have sanctified for my name. Then Israel will become an object of scorn and ridicule among all peoples. And when this temple has become a heap of rubble, all who pass by it will be appalled and will hiss and say, Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple? And others will answer, Because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshipping and serving them. Because of this, the Lord has brought all this disaster upon them. Now at the end of the 20 years during which Solomon built these 2 houses, the house of the Lord and the royal palace, King Solomon gave 20 towns in the land of Galilee to Hiram king of Tyre, who had supplied him with cedar and cypress logs and gold for his every desire. So Hiram went out from Tyre to inspect the towns that Solomon had given him, but he was not pleased with them. What are these towns you have given me, my brother? Asked Hiram, and he called them the land of Cabul, as they are called to this day. And Hiram had sent the king 120 talents of gold. This is the account of the forced labor that King Solomon imposed to build the house of the Lord, his own palace, the supporting terraces, and the wall of Jerusalem, as well as Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had attacked and captured Gezer. He had set it on fire, killed the Canaanites who lived in the city, and given it as a dowry to his daughter, Solomon's wife. So Solomon rebuilt Gezer, Lower Beth-horon, Baalath, and Tamar in the wilderness of Judah, as well as all the store cities that Solomon had for his chariots and horses, whatever he desired to build in Jerusalem, Lebanon, and throughout the land of his dominion. As for all the people who remained of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, the people who were not Israelites, their descendants who remained in the land, those whom the Israelites were unable to devote to destruction, Solomon conscripted these people to be forced laborers, as they are to this day. But Solomon did not consign any of the Israelites to slavery, because they were his men of war, his servants, his officers, his captains, and the commanders of his chariots and cavalry. They were also the chief officers over Solomon's projects, 550 supervisors over the people who did the work. As soon as Pharaoh's daughter had come up from the city of David to the palace that Solomon had built for her, he built the supporting terraces. 3 times a year Solomon offered burnt offerings and peace offerings on the altar he had built for the Lord, burning incense with them before the Lord. So he completed the temple. King Solomon also assembled a fleet of ships at Ezion-Geber, which is near Eloth in Edom, on the shore of the Red Sea. And Hiram sent his servants, men who knew the sea, to serve in the fleet with Solomon's servants. They sailed to Ophir and imported gold from there, 420 talents, and delivered it to Solomon. 1 Kings chapter 10. Now when the queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him with difficult questions. She arrived in Jerusalem with a very large caravan, with camels bearing spices, gold in great abundance, and precious stones. So she came to Solomon and spoke to him all that was on her mind, and Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too difficult for the king to explain. When the queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon, the palace he had built, the food at his table, the seating of his servants, the service and attire of his attendants and cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he presented at the house of the Lord, it took her breath away. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your words and wisdom is true, but I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told to me. Your wisdom and prosperity have far exceeded the report I heard. How blessed are your men! How blessed are these servants of yours who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom! Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you to set you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to carry out justice and righteousness." Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, a great quantity of spices, and precious stones. Never again was such an abundance of spices brought in as those the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. The fleet of Hiram that brought gold from Ophir also brought from Ophir a great cargo of almug wood and precious stones. The king made the almug wood into steps for the house of the Lord and for the king's palace, and into lyres and harps for the singers. Never before had such almug wood been brought in, nor has such been seen to this day. King Solomon gave the queen of Sheba all she desired, whatever she asked, besides what he had given her out of his royal bounty. Then she left and returned to her own country along with her servants. The weight of gold that came to Solomon each year was 666 talents, not including the revenue from the merchants, traders, and all the Arabian kings and governors of the land. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of gold went into each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold. 3 minas of gold went into each shield, and the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Additionally, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps, and its back had a rounded top. There were armrests on both sides of the seat, with a lion standing beside each armrest. 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one at either end of each step. Nothing like this had ever been made for any kingdom. All King Solomon's drinking cups were gold, and all the utensils of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. There was no silver, because it was accounted as nothing in the days of Solomon. For the king had the ships of Tarshish at sea with Hiram's fleet, and once every 3 years the ships of Tarshish would arrive bearing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. So King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. The whole world sought an audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom that God had put in his heart. Year after year, each visitor would bring his tribute, articles of silver and gold, clothing, weapons, spices, horses, and mules. Solomon accumulated 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses, which he stationed in the chariot cities, and also with him in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar as abundant as sycamore in the foothills. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and Cuwe. The royal merchants purchased them from Cuwe. A chariot could be imported from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150. Likewise, they exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and to the kings of Aram. 1 Kings chapter 11. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women along with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of Moab, Ammon, Edom, and Sidon, as well as Hittite women. These women were from the nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, for surely they will turn your hearts after their gods." Yet Solomon clung to these women in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. For when Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and he was not wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord his God, as his father David had been. Solomon followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord. Unlike his father David, he did not follow the Lord completely. At that time, on a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. Now the Lord grew angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had warned Solomon explicitly not to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. Then the Lord said to Solomon, "Because you have done this and have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. Nevertheless, for the sake of your father David, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom away from him. I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." Then the Lord raised up against Solomon an adversary, Hadad the Edomite, from the royal line of Edom. Earlier, when David was in Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, had gone to bury the dead and had struck down every male in Edom. Joab and all Israel had stayed there 6 months until he had killed every male in Edom. But Hadad, still just a young boy, had fled to Egypt along with some Edomites who were servants of his father. Hadad and his men set out from Midian and went to Paran. They took men from Paran with them and went to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house and land and provided him with food. There Hadad found such great favor in the sight of Pharaoh that he gave to him in marriage the sister of Queen Tahpenes, his own wife. And the sister of Tahpenes bore Hadad a son named Genubath. Tahpenes herself weaned him in Pharaoh's palace, and Genubath lived there among the sons of Pharaoh. When Hadad heard in Egypt that David had rested with his fathers and that Joab, the commander of the army, was dead, he said to Pharaoh, "Let me go, that I may return to my own country." But Pharaoh asked him, "What have you lacked here with me that you suddenly want to go back to your own country?" "Nothing," Hadad replied, "but please let me go." And God raised up against Solomon another adversary, Rezon the son of Eliada, who had fled from his master Hadadezer, king of Zobah, and had gathered men to himself. When David killed the Zobaites, Rezon captained a band of raiders and went to Damascus, where they settled and gained control. Rezon was Israel's enemy throughout the days of Solomon, adding to the trouble caused by Hadad. So Rezon ruled over Aram with hostility toward Israel. Now Jeroboam, son of Nebat, was an Ephraimite from Zereda, whose mother was a widow named Zeruiah. Jeroboam was a servant of Solomon, but he rebelled against the king, and this is the account of his rebellion against the king. Solomon had built the supporting terraces and repaired the gap in the wall of the city of his father David. Now Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. So when Solomon noticed that the young man was industrious, he put him in charge of the whole labor force of the house of Joseph. During that time, the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite met Jeroboam on the road as he was going out of Jerusalem. Now Ahijah had wrapped himself in a new cloak, and the two of them were alone in the open field. And Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing, tore it into 12 pieces, and said to Jeroboam, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and I will give you 10 tribes. But one tribe will remain for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. For they have forsaken me to worship Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the Ammonites. They have not walked in my ways, nor done what is right in my eyes, nor kept my statutes and judgments as Solomon's father David did. Nevertheless, I will not take the whole kingdom out of Solomon's hand, because I have made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David my servant, whom I chose because he kept my commandments and statutes. But I will take 10 tribes of the kingdom from the hand of his son and give them to you. I will give 1 tribe to his son, so that my servant David will always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I chose to put my name. But as for you, I will take you, and you shall reign over all that your heart desires, and you will be king over Israel. If you listen to all that I command you, walk in my ways, and do what is right in my sight, in order to keep my statutes and commandments as my servant David did, then I will be with you. I will build you a lasting dynasty, just as I built for David, and I will give Israel to you. Because of this I will humble David's descendants, but not forever." Solomon therefore sought to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt, where he remained until the death of Solomon. As for the rest of the acts of Solomon, all that he did, as well as his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the Acts of Solomon? Thus the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. And Solomon rested with his fathers, and was buried in the city of his father David, and his son Rehoboam reigned in his place. 1 Kings chapter 12. Then Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam son of Nebat heard about this, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon, and had been living ever since. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel came to Rehoboam, and said, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now you should lighten the burden of your father's service and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Rehoboam answered, "Go away for 3 days, and then return to me." So the people departed. Then King Rehoboam consulted with the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How do you advise me to respond to these people?" he asked. They replied, "If you will be a servant to these people and serve them this day, and if you will respond by speaking kind words to them, they will be your servants forever." But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders. Instead, he consulted the young men who had grown up with him and served him. He asked them, "What message do you advise that we send back to these people who have spoken to me, saying, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young men who had grown up with him replied, "This is how you should answer these people who said to you, 'Your father made our yoke heavy, but you should make it lighter.' This is what you should tell them: 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Whereas my father burdened you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. Whereas my father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." After 3 days, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam, since the king had said, "Come back to me on the 3rd day." And the king answered the people harshly. He rejected the advice of the elders, and spoke to them as the young men had advised, saying, "Whereas my father made your yoke heavy, I will add to your yoke. Whereas my father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." So the king did not listen to the people, and indeed this turn of events was from the Lord, to fulfill the word he had spoken to Jeroboam son of Nebat through Ahijah the Shilonite. When all Israel saw that the king had refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What portion do we have in David, and what inheritance in the son of Jesse? To your tents, O Israel! Look now to your own house, O David." So the Israelites went home, but Rehoboam still reigned over the Israelites living in the cities of Judah. Then King Rehoboam sent out Adoram, who was in charge of the forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. And King Rehoboam mounted his chariot in haste and escaped to Jerusalem. So to this day Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David. When all Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, they summoned him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. Only the tribe of Judah followed the house of David. And when Rehoboam arrived in Jerusalem, he mobilized the whole house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen warriors, to fight against the house of Israel and restore the kingdom to Rehoboam, son of Solomon. But the word of God came to Shemaiah the man of God. Tell Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, all the house of Judah and Benjamin and the rest of the people, that this is what the Lord says. You are not to go up and fight against your brothers the Israelites. Each of you must return home, for this word is from me. So they listened to the word of the Lord and turned back according to the word of the Lord. Then Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there, and from there he went out and built Penuel. Jeroboam said in his heart, Now the kingdom might revert to the house of David. If these people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, their hearts will return to their lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah. Then they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. After seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves and said to the people, Going up to Jerusalem is too much for you. Here, O Israel, are your gods who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. 1 calf he set up in Bethel and the other in Dan. And this thing became a sin. The people walked as far as Dan to worship before one of the calves. Jeroboam also built shrines on the high places and appointed from every class of people priests who were not Levites. And Jeroboam ordained a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the feast that was in Judah, and he offered sacrifices on the altar. He made this offering in Bethel to sacrifice to the calves he had set up, and he installed priests in Bethel for the high places he had set up. On the 15th day of the 8th month, a month of his own choosing, Jeroboam offered sacrifices on the altar he had set up in Bethel. So he ordained a feast for the Israelites, offered sacrifices on the altar, and burned incense. 1 Kings chapter 13. Suddenly, as Jeroboam was standing beside the altar to burn incense, there came a man of God from Judah to Bethel by the word of the Lord. And he cried out against the altar by the word of the Lord. O altar, this is what the Lord says. A son named Josiah will be born to the house of David, and upon you he will sacrifice the priests of the high places who burn incense upon you, and human bones will be burned upon you. That day the man of God gave a sign, saying, The Lord has spoken this sign. Surely the altar will be split apart, and the ashes upon it will be poured out. Now when King Jeroboam, who was at the altar in Bethel, heard the word that the man of God had cried out against it, he stretched out his hand and said, Seize him. But the hand he stretched out toward him withered, so that he could not pull it back. And the altar was split apart, and the ashes poured out, according to the sign that the man of God had given by the word of the Lord. Then the king responded to the man of God, Intercede with the Lord your God, and pray that my hand may be restored. So the man of God interceded with the Lord, and the king's hand was restored to him as it was before. Then the king said to the man of God, Come home with me and refresh yourself, and I will give you a reward. But the man of God replied, If you were to give me half your possessions, I still would not go with you, nor would I eat bread or drink water in this place. For this is what I was commanded by the word of the Lord. You must not eat bread or drink water or return by the way you came. So the man of God went another way, and did not return by the way he had come to Bethel. Now a certain old prophet was living in Bethel, and his sons came and told him all the deeds that the man of God had done that day in Bethel. They also told their father the words that the man had spoken to the king. Which way did he go? Their father asked, and his sons showed him the way taken by the man of God who had come from Judah. So the prophet said to his sons, Saddle the donkey for me. Then they saddled the donkey for him, and he mounted it, and went after the man of God. He found him sitting under an oak tree, and asked, Are you the man of God who came from Judah? I am, he replied. So the prophet said to the man of God, Come home with me, and eat some bread. But the man replied, I cannot return with you or eat bread or drink water with you in this place. For I have been told by the word of the Lord, you must not eat bread or drink water there or return by the way you came." Then the prophet replied, "I too am a prophet like you, and an angel spoke to me by the word of the Lord, saying, 'Bring him back with you to your house, so that he may eat bread and drink water.'" The old prophet was lying to him, but the man of God went back with him, ate bread in his house, and drank water. While they were sitting at the table, the word of the Lord came to the prophet who had brought him back, and the prophet cried out to the man of God who had come from Judah, "This is what the Lord says, because you have defied the word of the Lord and have not kept the commandment that the Lord your God gave you, but you went back and ate bread and drank water in the place where he told you not to do so, your body shall never reach the tomb of your fathers." And after the man of God had finished eating and drinking, the old prophet who had brought him back saddled the donkey for him. As he went on his way, a lion met him on the road and killed him, and his body was left lying in the road with the donkey and the lion standing beside it. And there were men passing by who saw the body lying in the road with the lion standing beside it, and they went and reported this in the city where the old prophet lived. When the prophet who had brought him back from his journey heard this, he said, "It is the man of God who disobeyed the command of the Lord. Therefore the Lord has delivered him to the lion, and it has mauled him and killed him according to the word that the Lord had spoken to him." Then the old prophet instructed his sons, "Saddle the donkey for me." So they saddled it, and he went and found the body lying in the road, with the donkey and the lion standing beside it. The lion had not eaten the body or mauled the donkey. So the old prophet lifted up the body of the man of God, laid it on the donkey, and brought it back to his own city to mourn for him and bury him. Then he laid the body in his own tomb, and they lamented over him, "O my brother." After he had buried him, the prophet said to his sons, "When I die, you must bury me in the tomb where the man of God is buried. Lay my bones beside his bones, for the message that he cried out by the word of the Lord against the altar in Bethel and against all the shrines on the high places in the cities of Samaria will surely come to pass." Even after these events, Jeroboam did not repent of his evil ways, but again he appointed priests for the high places from every class of people. He ordained anyone who desired to be a priest of the high places. And this was the sin of the house of Jeroboam that led to its extermination and destruction from the face of the earth. 1 Kings chapter 14. At that time Abijah son of Jeroboam became ill, and Jeroboam said to his wife, "Now get up, disguise yourself so they will not recognize you as my wife, and go to Shiloh. For Ahijah the prophet is there. It was he who spoke about my kingship over this people. Take with you 10 loaves of bread, some cakes, and a jar of honey, and go to him. He will tell you what will become of the boy." Jeroboam's wife did as instructed. She arose and went to Shiloh and arrived at Ahijah's house. Now Ahijah could not see, for his eyes were dim because of his age. But the Lord had said to Ahijah, "Behold, the wife of Jeroboam is coming to ask you about her son, for he is ill. You are to say such and such to her, because when she arrives she will be disguised." So when Ahijah heard the sound of her feet entering the door, he said, "Come in, wife of Jeroboam. Why are you disguised? For I have been sent to you with bad news. Go tell Jeroboam that this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I raised you up from among the people and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. I tore the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you. But you were not like my servant David, who kept my commandments and followed me with all his heart, doing only what was right in my eyes. You have done more evil than all who came before you. You have proceeded to make for yourself other gods and molten images to provoke me, and you have flung me behind your back. Because of all this, behold, I am bringing disaster on the house of Jeroboam. I will cut off from Jeroboam every male, both slave and free, in Israel. I will burn up the house of Jeroboam as one burns up dung until it is gone. Anyone belonging to Jeroboam who dies in the city will be eaten by dogs, and anyone who dies in the field will be eaten by the birds of the air. For the Lord has spoken. As for you, get up and go home. When your feet enter the city, the child will die. All Israel will mourn for him and bury him, for this is the only one belonging to Jeroboam who will receive a proper burial, because only in him has the Lord, the God of Israel, found any good in the house of Jeroboam. Moreover, the Lord will raise up for himself a king over Israel who will cut off the house of Jeroboam. This is the day, yes, even today. For the Lord will strike Israel as a reed is shaken in the water. he will uproot Israel from this good land that he gave their fathers, and he will scatter them beyond the Euphrates, because they have made their Asherah poles, provoking the Lord to anger. So he will give Israel over on account of the sins Jeroboam has committed and has caused Israel to commit." Then Jeroboam's wife got up and departed for Tirzah, and as soon as she stepped over the threshold of the house, the boy died. And they buried him, and all Israel mourned for him according to the word that the Lord had spoken through his servant Ahijah the prophet. As for the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he waged war and how he reigned, they are indeed written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel. And the length of Jeroboam's reign was 22 years, and he rested with his fathers, and his son Nadab reigned in his place. Meanwhile Rehoboam, son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. He was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city the Lord had chosen from all the tribes of Israel in which to put his name. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonite. And Judah did evil in the sight of the Lord, and by the sins they committed they provoked him to jealous anger more than all their fathers had done. They also built for themselves high places, sacred pillars and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every green tree. There were even male shrine prostitutes in the land. They imitated all the abominations of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. In the 5th year of Rehoboam's reign, Shishak, king of Egypt, came up and attacked Jerusalem. He seized the treasures of the house of the Lord and of the royal palace. He took everything, including all the gold shields that Solomon had made. Then King Rehoboam made bronze shields in their place and committed them to the care of the captains of the guard on duty at the entrance to the royal palace. And whenever the king entered the house of the Lord, the guards would bear the shields, and later they would return them to the guardroom. As for the rest of the acts of Rehoboam, along with all that he did, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? There was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam throughout their days. And Rehoboam rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonite, and his son Abijam reigned in his place. 1 Kings chapter 15. In the 18th year of the reign of Jeroboam son of Nebat, Abijam became king of Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. And Abijam walked in all the sins that his father before him had committed, and his heart was not as fully devoted to the Lord his God as the heart of David his forefather had been. Nevertheless, for the sake of David, the Lord his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem by raising up a son to succeed him and to make Jerusalem strong. For David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and had not turned aside from anything the Lord commanded all the days of his life, except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. And there was war between the houses of Rehoboam and Jeroboam all the days of Abijam's life. As for the rest of the acts of Abijam, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And there was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. And Abijam rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, and his son Asa reigned in his place. In the 20th year of Jeroboam's reign over Israel, Asa became king of Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 41 years. His grandmother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. And Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as his father David had done. He banished the male shrine prostitutes from the land and removed all the idols that his fathers had made. He also removed his grandmother Maacah from her position as queen mother because she had made a detestable Asherah pole. Asa chopped down the pole and burned it in the Kidron Valley. The high places were not removed, but Asa's heart was fully devoted to the Lord all his days. And he brought into the house of the Lord the silver and gold and other articles that he and his father had dedicated. Now there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, throughout their days. Baasha, king of Israel, went to war against Judah and fortified Ramah to prevent anyone from leaving or entering the territory of Asa, king of Judah. So Asa withdrew all the silver and gold that remained in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the royal palace. He entrusted it to his servants and sent them with this message to Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimmon, the son of Hezion, king of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus. Let there be a treaty between me and you, between my father and your father. See, I have sent you a gift of silver and gold. Now go and break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me. And Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his army against the cities of Israel. conquering Ijon, Dan, Abel-Beth-Maacah, and the whole land of Naphtali, including the region of Kinnereth. When Baasha learned of this, he stopped fortifying Ramah and withdrew to Tirzah. Then King Asa summoned all the men of Judah with no exceptions, and they carried away the stones of Ramah and the timbers Baasha had used for building. And with these materials King Asa built up Geba of Benjamin as well as Mizpah. Now the rest of the acts of Asa, along with all his might, all his accomplishments, and the cities he built, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? In his old age, however, he became diseased in his feet. And Asa rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of his father David, and his son Jehoshaphat reigned in his place. In the 2nd year of Asa's reign over Judah, Nadab son of Jeroboam became king of Israel, and he reigned 2 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of his father, and in his sin which he had caused Israel to commit. Then Baasha son of Ahijah of the house of Issachar conspired against Nadab, and Baasha struck him down at Gibbethon of the Philistines, while Nadab and all Israel were besieging the city. In the 3rd year of Asa's reign over Judah, Baasha killed Nadab and reigned in his place. As soon as Baasha became king, he struck down the entire household of Jeroboam. He did not leave to Jeroboam anyone that breathed, but destroyed them all, according to the word that the Lord had spoken through his servant Ahijah the Shilonite, because of the sins Jeroboam had committed and had caused Israel to commit, and because he had provoked the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger. As for the rest of the acts of Nadab, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, throughout their days. In the 3rd year of Asa's reign over Judah, Baasha son of Ahijah became king of all Israel, and he reigned in Tirzah 24 years. And Baasha did evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of Jeroboam, and in his sin, which he had caused Israel to commit. 1 Kings chapter 16. Then the word of the Lord came to Jehu son of Hanani against Baasha, saying, Even though I lifted you out of the dust and made you ruler over my people Israel, you have walked in the way of Jeroboam, and have caused my people Israel to sin and to provoke me to anger by their sins. So now I will consume Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like that of Jeroboam son of Nebat. Anyone belonging to Baasha who dies in the city will be eaten by dogs, and anyone who dies in the field will be eaten by the birds of the air. As for the rest of the acts of Baasha, along with his accomplishments and might, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Baasha rested with his fathers and was buried in Tirzah, and his son Elah reigned in his place. Moreover, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Jehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha and his house, because of all the evil he had done in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger with the work of his hands, and becoming like the house of Jeroboam, and also because Baasha had struck down the house of Jeroboam. In the 26th year of Asa's reign over Judah, Elah, son of Baasha, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Tirzah 2 years. However, while Elah was in Tirzah, getting drunk in the house of Arzah the steward of his household there, Elah's servant Zimri, the commander of half his chariots, conspired against him. So, in the 27th year of Asa's reign over Judah, Zimri went in, struck Elah down, and killed him, and Zimri reigned in his place. As soon as Zimri began to reign and was seated on the throne, he struck down the entire household of Baasha. He did not leave a single male, whether a kinsman or friend. So Zimri destroyed the entire household of Baasha, according to the word that the Lord had spoken against Baasha through Jehu the prophet. This happened because of all the sins Baasha and his son Elah had committed and had caused Israel to commit, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger with their worthless idols. As for the rest of the acts of Elah, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? In the 27th year of Asa's reign over Judah, Zimri reigned in Tirzah for 7 days. Now the troops were encamped against Gibbethon of the Philistines, and the people in the camp heard that Zimri had not only conspired, but had also struck down the king. So there, in the camp that very day, all Israel proclaimed Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel. Then Omri and all the Israelites marched up from Gibbethon and besieged Tirzah. When Zimri saw that the city was captured, he entered the citadel of the royal palace and burned it down upon himself. So he died because of the sins he had committed, doing evil in the sight of the Lord and following the example of Jeroboam and the sin he had committed and had caused Israel to commit. As for the rest of the acts of Zimri and the treason he committed, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? At that time the people of Israel were divided. Half of the people supported Tibni, son of Ginath, as king, and half supported Omri. But the followers of Omri proved stronger than those of Tibni, son of Ginath. So Tibni died, and Omri became king. In the 31st year of Asa's reign over Judah, Omri became king of Israel, and he reigned 12 years, 6 of them in Tirzah. He bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver and built a city there, calling it Samaria after the name of Shemer, who had owned the hill. But Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord and acted more wickedly than all who were before him. For he walked in all the ways of Jeroboam son of Nebat, and in his sins, which he caused Israel to commit, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger with their worthless idols. As for the rest of the acts of Omri, along with his accomplishments and the might he exercised, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Omri rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria, and his son Ahab reigned in his place. In the 38th year of Asa's reign over Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 22 years. However, Ahab, son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord, more than all who were before him. And as if it were not enough for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, he even married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and he then proceeded to serve and worship Baal. First, Ahab set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he had built in Samaria. Then he set up an Asherah pole. Thus Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel before him. In Ahab's days, Hiel the Bethelite rebuilt Jericho. At the cost of Abiram his firstborn he laid its foundation, and at the cost of Segub his youngest he set up its gates, according to the word that the Lord had spoken through Joshua son of Nun. 1 Kings chapter 17. Now Elijah the Tishbite, who was among the settlers of Gilead, said to Ahab, As surely as the Lord lives, the God of Israel before whom I stand, there will be neither dew nor rain in these years except at my word. Then a revelation from the Lord came to Elijah. Leave here, turn eastward, and hide yourself by the brook of Kerith, east of the Jordan. And you are to drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So Elijah did what the Lord had told him, and he went and lived by the brook of Kerith, east of the Jordan. The ravens would bring him bread and meat in the morning and evening, and he would drink from the brook. Some time later, however, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, Get up and go to Zarephath of Sidon and stay there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. So Elijah got up and went to Zarephath. When he arrived at the city gate, there was a widow gathering sticks. Elijah called to her and said, Please bring me a little water in a cup so that I may drink. And as she was going to get it, he called to her and said, Please bring me a piece of bread. But she replied, As surely as the Lord your God lives, I have no bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. Look, I am gathering a couple of sticks to take home and prepare a meal for myself and my son, so that we may eat it and die. Do not be afraid, Elijah said to her. Go and do as you have said, but first make me a small cake of bread from what you have, and bring it out to me. Afterward make some for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, The jar of flour will not be exhausted, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain upon the face of the earth. So she went and did according to the word of Elijah, and there was food every day for Elijah and the woman and her household. The jar of flour was not exhausted, and the jug of oil did not run dry, according to the word that the Lord had spoken through Elijah. Later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill, and his sickness grew worse and worse until no breath remained in him. "O man of God," said the woman to Elijah, "what have you done to me? Have you come to remind me of my iniquity and cause the death of my son?" But Elijah said to her, "Give me your son." So he took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his own bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you also brought tragedy on this widow who has opened her home to me by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out over the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, please let this boy's life return to him." And the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah, and the child's life returned to him, and he lived. Then Elijah took the child, brought him down from the upper room into the house, and gave him to his mother. "Look, your son is alive," Elijah declared. Then the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is truth." 1 Kings chapter 18. After a long time, in the 3rd year of the drought, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. "Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the face of the earth." So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. The famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of the palace. Now Obadiah greatly feared the Lord, for when Jezebel had slaughtered the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 men per cave, providing them with food and water. Then Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go throughout the land to every spring and every valley. Perhaps we will find grass to keep the horses and mules alive so that we will not have to destroy any livestock." So they divided the land to explore. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went the other way by himself. Now as Obadiah went on his way, Elijah suddenly met him. When Obadiah recognized him, he fell face down and said, "Is it you, my lord Elijah?" "It is I," he answered. "Go tell your master, Elijah is here." But Obadiah replied, "How have I sinned that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to put me to death? As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my Lord has not sent someone to search for you." When they said, "He is not here," he made that kingdom or nation swear that they had not found you. And now you say, "Go tell your master that Elijah is here." I do not know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you off when I leave you. Then when I go and tell Ahab and he does not find you, he will kill me. But I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. Was it not reported to my Lord what I did when Jezebel slaughtered the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 prophets of the Lord, 50 men per cave, and I provided them with food and water. And now you say, "Go tell your Lord that Elijah is here. He will kill me." Then Elijah said, "As surely as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will present myself to Ahab today." So Obadiah went to inform Ahab, who went to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?" "I have not troubled Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's house have, for you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and have followed the Baals. Now summon all Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab summoned all the Israelites and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Then Elijah approached all the people and said, "How long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." But the people did not answer a word. Then Elijah said to the people, "I am the only remaining prophet of the Lord, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let the prophets of Baal choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it into pieces, and place it on the wood, but not light the fire. And I will prepare the other bull and place it on the wood, but not light the fire. Then you may call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." And all the people answered, "What you say is good." Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Since you are so numerous, choose for yourselves 1 bull and prepare it first. Then call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." And they took the bull that was given them, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, shouting, O Baal, answer us. But there was no sound, and no one answered as they leaped around the altar they had made. At noon Elijah began to taunt them, saying, Shout louder, for he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or occupied, or on a journey. Perhaps he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and cut themselves with knives and lances, as was their custom, until the blood gushed over them. Midday passed, and they kept on raving until the time of the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, Come near to me. So all the people approached him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. And Elijah took 12 stones, one for each tribe of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, and said, Israel shall be your name. And with the stones Elijah built an altar in the name of the Lord. Then he dug a trench around the altar large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. Next he arranged the wood, cut up the bull, placed it on the wood, and said, Fill 4 water pots and pour the water on the offering and on the wood. Do it a second time, he said, and they did it a second time. Do it a third time, he said, and they did it a third time. So the water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet approached the altar and said, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord. Answer me, so that this people will know that you, the Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and it licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell face down and said, The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. Then Elijah ordered them, Seize the prophets of Baal, do not let a single one escape. So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the Kishon valley and slaughtered them there. And Elijah said to Ahab, Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the summit of Carmel, bent down on the ground, and put his face between his knees. Go and look toward the sea, he said to his servant. So the servant went and looked, and he said, There is nothing there. 7 times Elijah said, Go back. On the 7th time the servant reported, There is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea. And Elijah replied, Go and tell Ahab, Prepare your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. Meanwhile the sky grew dark with clouds and wind, and a heavy rain began to fall. So Ahab rode away and went to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord came upon Elijah, and he tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. 1 Kings chapter 19. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, May the gods deal with me, and ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like the lives of those you killed. And Elijah was afraid, and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself traveled on a day's journey into the wilderness. He sat down under a broom tree and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my father's. Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said, Get up and eat. And he looked around, and there by his head was a cake of bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. A second time the angel of the Lord returned and touched him, saying, Get up and eat, or the journey will be too much for you. So he got up and ate and drank. And strengthened by that food he walked 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There Elijah entered a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him, saying, What are you doing here, Elijah? I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, he replied. But the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I am the only one left, and they are seeking my life as well." Then the Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. Behold, the Lord is about to pass by." And a great and mighty wind tore into the mountains and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a still small voice. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts," he replied, "but the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword. I am the only one left, and they are seeking my life as well." Then the Lord said to him, "Go back by the way you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you arrive, you are to anoint Hazael as king over Aram. You are also to anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel, and Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel-Meholah, to succeed you as prophet. Then Jehu will put to death whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death whoever escapes the sword of Jehu. Nevertheless, I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him." So Elijah departed and found Elisha, son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 12 teams of oxen, and he was with the 12th team. Elijah passed by him and threw his cloak around him. So Elisha left the oxen, ran after Elijah, and said, "Please let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I will follow you." "Go on back," Elijah replied, "for what have I done to you?" So Elisha turned back from him, took his pair of oxen, and slaughtered them. With the oxen's equipment he cooked the meat and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow and serve Elijah. 1 Kings chapter 20. Now Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, assembled his entire army. Accompanied by 32 kings with their horses and chariots, he marched up, besieged Samaria, and waged war against it. Then he sent messengers into the city to Ahab, king of Israel, saying, "This is what Ben-Hadad says, Your silver and gold are mine, and your best wives and children are mine." And the king of Israel replied, "Just as you say, my lord the king, I am yours, along with all that I have." The messengers came back and said, "This is what Ben-Hadad says, I have sent to you to demand your silver, your gold, your wives, and your children. But about this time tomorrow I will send my servants to search your palace and the houses of your servants. They will seize and carry away all that is precious to you." Then the king of Israel summoned all the elders of the land and said, "Please take note and see that this man is looking for trouble, for when he demanded my wives, my children, my silver, and my gold, I did not deny him." And the elders and the people all said, "Do not listen to him or consent to his terms." So Ahab answered the messengers of Ben-Hadad, "Tell my lord the king, all that you demanded of your servant the first time I will do, but this thing I cannot do." So the messengers departed and relayed the message to Ben-Hadad. Then Ben-Hadad sent another message to Ahab, "May the gods deal with me, and ever so severely, if enough dust remains of Samaria for each of my men to have a handful." And the king of Israel replied, "Tell him, the one putting on his armor should not boast like one taking it off." Ben-Hadad received this message while he and the kings were drinking in their tents, and he said to his servants, "Take your positions." So they stationed themselves against the city. Meanwhile a prophet approached Ahab, king of Israel, and declared, "This is what the Lord says. Do you see this entire great army? Behold, I will deliver it into your hand this very day, and you will know that I am the Lord." "By whom?" Ahab asked. And the prophet replied, "This is what the Lord says, by the young officers of the district governors." "Who will start the battle?" asked Ahab. "You will," answered the prophet. So Ahab assembled the young officers of the district governors, and there were 232 men. And after them he assembled the rest of the Israelite troops, 7,000 in all. They marched out at noon while Ben-Hadad and the 32 kings allied with him were in their tents getting drunk. and the young officers of the district governors marched out first. Now Ben-Hadad had sent out scouts who reported to him, "Men are marching out of Samaria. If they have marched out in peace," he said, "take them alive. Even if they have marched out for war, take them alive." Meanwhile, these young officers of the district governors marched out of the city with the army behind them, and each one struck down his opponent. So the Arameans fled with the Israelites in pursuit. But Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, escaped on horseback with the cavalry. Then the king of Israel marched out and attacked the horses and chariots, inflicting a great slaughter on the Arameans. Afterward, the prophet approached the king of Israel and said, "Go and strengthen your position and take note what you must do, for in the spring the king of Aram will come up against you." Meanwhile the servants of the king of Aram said to him, "Their gods are gods of the hills. That is why they prevailed over us. Instead we should fight them on the plains. Surely then we will prevail. So do this. Dismiss all the kings from their positions and replace them with other officers. And you must raise an army like the one you have lost, horse for horse and chariot for chariot. So we can fight the Israelites on the plain, where we will surely prevail." And the king approved their plan and acted accordingly. In the spring, Ben-Hadad mobilized the Arameans and went up to Aphek to fight against Israel. The Israelites also mobilized, gathered supplies, and marched out to meet them. The Israelites camped before them like two small flocks of goats, while the Arameans covered the countryside. Then the man of God approached the king of Israel and said, "This is what the Lord says. Because the Arameans think the Lord is a God of the hills and not of the valleys, I will deliver all this great army into your hand. Then you will know that I am the Lord." For 7 days the armies camped opposite each other, and on the 7th day the battle ensued, and the Israelites struck down the Arameans, 100,000 foot soldiers, in 1 day. The rest of them fled into the city of Aphek, where the wall fell on 27,000 of the remaining men. Ben-Hadad also fled to the city and hid in an inner room. Then the servants of Ben-Hadad said to him, "Look now, we have heard that the kings of the house of Israel are merciful. Let us go out to the king of Israel with sackcloth around our waists and ropes around our heads. Perhaps he will spare your life." So with sackcloth around their waists and ropes around their heads, they went to the king of Israel and said, "Your servant Ben-Hadad says, 'Please spare my life.'" And the king answered, "Is he still alive? He is my brother." Now the men were looking for a sign of hope, and they quickly grasped at this word and replied, "Yes, your brother Ben-Hadad." "Go and get him," said the king. Then Ben-Hadad came out, and Ahab had him come up into his chariot. Ben-Hadad said to him, "I will restore the cities my father took from your father. You may set up your own marketplaces in Damascus, as my father did in Samaria." "By this treaty I release you," Ahab replied. So he made a treaty with him and sent him away. Meanwhile, by the word of the Lord, one of the sons of the prophets said to his companion, "Strike me, please." But the man refused to strike him. Then the prophet said to him, "Because you have not obeyed the voice of the Lord, as soon as you depart from me, a lion will kill you." And when he left, a lion found him and killed him. Then the prophet found another man and said, "Strike me, please." So the man struck him and wounded him, and the prophet went and waited on the road for the king, disguising himself with a bandage over his eyes. As the king passed by, he cried out to the king, "Your servant had marched out into the middle of the battle, when suddenly a man came over with a captive and told me, 'Guard this man. If he goes missing for any reason, your life will be exchanged for his life, or you will weigh out a talent of silver.' But while your servant was busy here and there, the man disappeared." And the king of Israel said to him, "So shall your judgment be. You have pronounced it on yourself." Then the prophet quickly removed the bandage from his eyes, and the king of Israel recognized him as one of the prophets. And the prophet said to the king, "This is what the Lord says, because you have let slip from your hand the man I had devoted to destruction, your life will be exchanged for his life, and your people for his people." Sullen and angry, the king of Israel went home to Samaria. 1 Kings chapter 21. Sometime later, Naboth the Jezreelite happened to own a vineyard in Jezreel next to the palace of Ahab king of Samaria. So Ahab said to Naboth, "Give me your vineyard to use as a vegetable garden, since it is next to my palace. I will give you a better vineyard in its place, or if you prefer, I will give you its value in silver." But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." So Ahab went to his palace, sullen and angry because Naboth the Jezreelite had told him, "I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers." He lay down in his bed, turned his face away, and refused to eat. Soon his wife Jezebel came in and asked, "Why are you so sullen that you refuse to eat?" Ahab answered, "Because I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite and told him, 'Give me your vineyard for silver, or if you wish, I will give you another vineyard in its place.' And he replied, 'I will not give you my vineyard.'" But his wife Jezebel said to him, "Do you not reign over Israel? Get up, eat some food, and be cheerful, for I will get you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." Then Jezebel wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his seal, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived with Naboth in his city. In the letters she wrote, "Proclaim a fast and give Naboth a seat of honor among the people, but seat 2 scoundrels opposite him and have them testify, 'You have cursed both God and the king.' Then take him out and stone him to death." So the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city did as Jezebel had instructed in the letters she had written to them. They proclaimed a fast and gave Naboth a seat of honor among the people. And the 2 scoundrels came in and sat opposite Naboth, and these men testified against him before the people, saying, "Naboth has cursed both God and the king." So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Then they sent word to Jezebel, "Naboth has been stoned to death." When Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she said to Ahab, "Get up and take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, who refused to give it to you for silver. For Naboth is no longer alive, but dead." And when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, he got up and went down to take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, "Get up and go down to meet Ahab king of Israel, who is in Samaria. See, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, of which he has gone to take possession. Tell him that this is what the Lord says, 'Have you not murdered a man and seized his land?' Then tell him that this is also what the Lord says, 'In the place where the dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, there also the dogs will lick up your blood, yes, yours.'" When Elijah arrived, Ahab said to him, "So you have found me out, my enemy." He replied, "I have found you out because you have sold yourself to do evil in the sight of the Lord. This is what the Lord says, 'I will bring calamity on you and consume your descendants. I will cut off from Ahab every male in Israel, both slave and free. I will make your house like that of Jeroboam son of Nebat, and like that of Baasha son of Ahijah, because you have provoked my anger and caused Israel to sin.'" And the Lord also speaks concerning Jezebel, "The dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. Anyone belonging to Ahab who dies in the city will be eaten by dogs, and anyone who dies in the field will be eaten by the birds of the air." Surely there was never one like Ahab, who sold himself to do evil in the sight of the Lord, incited by his wife Jezebel. He committed the most detestable acts by going after idols, just like the Amorites whom the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. When Ahab heard these words, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and fasted. He lay down in sackcloth and walked around meekly. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, "Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring the calamity during his days, but I will bring it upon his house in the days of his son." 1 Kings chapter 22. Then 3 years passed without war between Aram and Israel. However, in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, went down to visit the king of Israel, who said to his servants, "Do you not know that Ramoth-Gilead is ours, but we have failed to take it from the hand of the king of Aram?" So he asked Jehoshaphat, "Will you go with me to fight against Ramoth-Gilead?" Jehoshaphat answered the king of Israel, "I am like you, my people are your people, and my horses are your horses." But Jehoshaphat also said to the king of Israel, "Please inquire first for the word of the Lord." So the king of Israel assembled the prophets, about 400 men, and asked them, "Should I go to war against Ramoth-Gilead, or should I refrain?" "Go up," they replied, "and the Lord will deliver it into the hand of the king." But Jehoshaphat asked, "Is there not still a prophet of the Lord here of whom we can inquire?" The king of Israel answered, "There is still one man who can ask the Lord, but I hate him because he never prophesies anything good for me, but only bad. He is Micaiah, son of Imlah." "The king should not say that," Jehoshaphat replied. So the king of Israel called one of his officials and said, "Bring Micaiah, son of Imlah, at once." Dressed in royal attire, the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, were sitting on their thrones at the threshing floor by the entrance of the gate of Samaria, with all the prophets prophesying before them. Now Zedekiah, son of Chenaanah, had made for himself iron horns and declared, "This is what the Lord says, with these you shall gore the Arameans until they are finished off." And all the prophets were prophesying the same, saying, "Go up to Ramoth-Gilead and prosper, for the Lord will deliver it into the hand of the king." Then the messenger who had gone to call Micaiah instructed him, "Behold now, with one accord the words of the prophets are favorable to the king. So please let your words be like theirs, and speak favorably." But Micaiah said, "As surely as the Lord lives, I will speak whatever the Lord tells me." When Micaiah arrived, the king asked him, "Micaiah, should we go to war against Ramoth-Gilead, or should we refrain?" "Go up in triumph," Micaiah replied, "for the Lord will give it into the hand of the king." But the king said to him, "How many times must I make you swear not to tell me anything but the truth in the name of the Lord?" So Micaiah declared, "I saw all Israel scattered on the hills like sheep without a shepherd. And the Lord said, 'These people have no master. Let each one return home in peace.'" Then the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Did I not tell you that he never prophesies good for me, but only bad?" Micaiah continued, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right and on his left. And the Lord said, 'Who will entice Ahab to march up and fall at Ramoth-Gilead?' And one suggested this, and another that. Then a spirit came forward, stood before the Lord, and said, 'I will entice him.' 'By what means?' asked the Lord. And he replied, 'I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets.' 'You will surely entice him and prevail,' said the Lord. 'Go and do it.' So you see, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouths of all these prophets of yours, and the Lord has pronounced disaster against you." Then Zedekiah son of Chenaanah went up, struck Micaiah in the face, and demanded, "Which way did the Spirit of the Lord go when he departed from me to speak with you?" Micaiah replied, "You will soon see, on that day when you go and hide in an inner room." And the king of Israel declared, "Take Micaiah and return him to Ammon the governor of the city and to Joash the king's son, and tell them that this is what the king says, 'Put this man in prison and feed him only bread and water until I return safely.'" But Micaiah replied, "If you ever return safely, the Lord has not spoken through me." Then he added, "Take heed, all you people." So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat king of Judah went up to Ramoth-Gilead. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "I will disguise myself and go into battle, but you wear your royal robes." So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Aram had ordered his 32 chariot commanders, "Do not fight with anyone, small or great, except the king of Israel." When the chariot commanders saw Jehoshaphat, they said, "Surely this is the king of Israel." So they turned to fight against him, but Jehoshaphat cried out. And when the chariot commanders saw that he was not the king of Israel, they turned back from pursuing him. However, a certain man drew his bow without taking special aim, and he struck the king of Israel between the joints of his armor. So the king said to his charioteer, "Turn around and take me out of the battle, for I am badly wounded." The battle raged throughout that day, and the king was propped up in his chariot facing the Arameans, and the blood from his wound ran out onto the floor of the chariot, and that evening he died. As the sun was setting, the cry rang out in the army, "Every man to his own city, and every man to his own land." So the king died and was brought to Samaria, where they buried him. And the chariot was washed at the pool of Samaria, where the prostitutes bathed, and the dogs licked up Ahab's blood, according to the word that the Lord had spoken. As for the rest of the acts of Ahab, along with all his accomplishments, and the ivory palace, and all the cities he built, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Ahab rested with his fathers, and his son Ahaziah reigned in his place. In the 4th year of Ahab's reign over Israel, Jehoshaphat son of Asa became king of Judah. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 25 years. His mother's name was Azubah, daughter of Shilhi. And Jehoshaphat walked in all the ways of his father Asa. He did not turn away from them, but did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. The high places, however, were not removed. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. Jehoshaphat also made peace with the king of Israel. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, along with the might he exercised and how he waged war, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? He banished from the land the male shrine prostitutes who remained from the days of his father Asa. And there was no king in Edom. A deputy served as king. Jehoshaphat built ships of Tarshish to go to Ophir for gold, but they never set sail because they were wrecked at Ezion-Geber. At that time Ahaziah son of Ahab said to Jehoshaphat, "Let my servants sail with your servants." But Jehoshaphat refused. And Jehoshaphat rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of his father David. And his son Jehoram reigned in his place. In the 17th year of Jehoshaphat's reign over Judah, Ahaziah son of Ahab became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 2 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the ways of his father and mother, and of Jeroboam son of Nebat, who had caused Israel to sin. Ahaziah served and worshipped Baal, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger, just as his father had done. 2 Kings chapter 1. After the death of Ahab, Moab rebelled against Israel. Now Ahaziah had fallen through the lattice of his upper room in Samaria and injured himself. So he sent messengers and instructed them, "Go inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, whether I will recover from this injury." But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, "Go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and ask them, 'Is it because there is no God in Israel that you are on your way to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore this is what the Lord says, You will not get up from the bed on which you are lying, you will surely die." So Elijah departed. When the messengers returned to the king, he asked them, "Why have you returned?" They replied, "A man came up to meet us and said, 'Go back to the king who sent you and tell him that this is what the Lord says. Is it because there is no God in Israel that you are sending these men to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore you will not get up from the bed on which you are lying, you will surely die.'" The king asked them, "What sort of man came up to meet you and spoke these words to you?" "He was a hairy man," they answered, "with a leather belt around his waist." "It was Elijah the Tishbite," said the king. Then King Ahaziah sent to Elijah a captain with his company of 50 men. So the captain went up to Elijah, who was sitting on top of a hill, and said to him, "Man of God, the king declares, 'Come down.'" Elijah answered the captain, "If I am a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men." And fire came down from heaven and consumed the captain and his 50 men. So the king sent to Elijah another captain with his 50 men. And the captain said to Elijah, "Man of God, the king declares, 'Come down at once.'" Again Elijah replied, "If I am a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men." And the fire of God came down from heaven and consumed the captain and his 50 men. So the king sent a third captain with his 50 men. And the third captain went up, fell on his knees before Elijah, and begged him, "Man of God, may my life and the lives of these 50 servants please be precious in your sight. Behold, fire has come down from heaven and consumed the first 2 captains of 50 with all their men. But now may my life be precious in your sight." Then the angel of the Lord said to Elijah, "Go down with him, do not be afraid of him." So Elijah got up and went down with him to the king. And Elijah said to King Ahaziah, "This is what the Lord says, Is there really no God in Israel for you to inquire of his word? Is that why you have sent messengers to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore you will not get up from the bed on which you are lying, you will surely die." So Ahaziah died according to the word of the Lord that Elijah had spoken. And since he had no son, Jehoram succeeded him in the 2nd year of the reign of Jehoram son of Jehoshaphat over Judah. As for the rest of the acts of Ahaziah, along with his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? 2 Kings chapter 2. Shortly before the Lord took Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. And Elijah said to Elisha, "Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me on to Bethel." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. Then the sons of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elisha and said, "Do you know that the Lord will take your master away from you today?" "Yes, I know," he replied. "Do not speak of it." And Elijah said to Elisha, "Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me on to Jericho." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went to Jericho. Then the sons of the prophets at Jericho came up to Elisha and said, "Do you know that the Lord will take your master away from you today?" "Yes, I know," he replied. "Do not speak of it." And Elijah said to Elisha, "Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me on to the Jordan." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. Then a company of 50 of the sons of the prophets went and stood at a distance, facing Elijah and Elisha as the two of them stood by the Jordan. And Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the waters, which parted to the right and to the left, so that the two of them crossed over on dry ground. After they had crossed over, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken away from you?" "Please let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elisha replied. "You have requested a difficult thing," said Elijah. "Nevertheless, if you see me as I am taken from you, it will be yours, but if not, then it will not be so." As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire with horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up into heaven in a whirlwind. As Elisha watched, he cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel!" And he saw Elijah no more. So taking hold of his own clothes, he tore them in two. Elisha also picked up the cloak that had fallen from Elijah, and he went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. Then he took the cloak of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the waters. "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" he asked. And when he had struck the waters, they parted to the right and to the left, and Elisha crossed over. When the sons of the prophets who were facing him from Jericho saw what had happened, they said, "The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha." And they went to meet him and bowed down to the ground before him. "Look now," they said to Elisha, "we, your servants, have 50 valiant men. Please let them go and search for your master. Perhaps the Spirit of the Lord has taken him up and put him on one of the mountains or in one of the valleys." "Do not send them," Elisha replied. But when they pressed him to the point of embarrassment, he said, "Send them." And they sent 50 men who searched for 3 days, but did not find Elijah. When they returned to Elisha, who was staying in Jericho, he said to them, "Didn't I tell you not to go?" Then the men of the city said to Elisha, "Please note, our lord, that the city's location is good, as you can see, but the water is bad and the land is unfruitful." "Bring me a new bowl," he replied, "and put some salt in it." So they brought it to him, and Elisha went out to the spring, cast the salt into it, and said, "This is what the Lord says, I have healed this water. No longer will it cause death or unfruitfulness." And the waters there have been healthy to this day, according to the word spoken by Elisha. From there Elisha went up to Bethel, and as he was walking up the road, a group of boys came out of the city and jeered at him, chanting, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" Then he turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Suddenly 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. And Elisha went on to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria. 2 Kings chapter 3. In the 18th year of Jehoshaphat's reign over Judah, Jehoram son of Ahab became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 12 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as his father and mother had done. He removed the sacred pillar of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. Now Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and he would render to the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But after the death of Ahab, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So at that time King Jehoram set out from Samaria and mobilized all Israel. And he sent a message to Jehoshaphat king of Judah. The king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? I will go, replied Jehoshaphat. I am like you, my people are your people, and my horses are your horses. Then he asked, Which way shall we go up? By way of the desert of Edom, replied Joram. So the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom set out, and after they had traveled a roundabout route for 7 days, they had no water for their army or for their animals. Alas, said the king of Israel, for the Lord has summoned these 3 kings to deliver them into the hand of Moab. But Jehoshaphat asked, Is there no prophet of the Lord here? Let us inquire of the Lord through him. And one of the servants of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. Jehoshaphat affirmed, The word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. Elisha, however, said to the king of Israel, What have we to do with each other? Go to the prophets of your father and of your mother. No, replied the king of Israel, for it is the Lord who has summoned these 3 kings to deliver them into the hand of Moab. Then Elisha said, As surely as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, were it not for my regard for the presence of Jehoshaphat king of Judah, I would not look at you or acknowledge you. But now bring me a harpist. And while the harpist played, the hand of the Lord came upon Elisha, and he said, This is what the Lord says, Dig this valley full of ditches. For the Lord says, You will not see wind or rain, but the valley will be filled with water, and you will drink, you and your cattle and your animals. This is a simple matter in the sight of the Lord, and he will also deliver the Moabites into your hand. And you shall attack every fortified city and every city of importance. You shall cut down every good tree, stop up every spring, and ruin every good field with stones. The next morning, at the time of the morning sacrifice, water suddenly flowed from the direction of Edom and filled the land. Now all the Moabites had heard that the kings had come up to fight against them. So all who could bear arms, young and old, were summoned and stationed at the border. When they got up early in the morning, the sun was shining on the water, and it looked as red as blood to the Moabites across the way. This is blood, they exclaimed. The kings have clashed swords and slaughtered one another. Now to the plunder Moab. But when the Moabites came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose up and attacked them, and they fled before them. So the Israelites invaded their land and struck down the Moabites. They destroyed the cities, and each man threw stones on every good field until it was covered. They stopped up every spring and cut down every good tree. Only Kir-Hareseth was left with stones in place, but men with slings surrounded it and attacked it as well. When the king of Moab saw that the battle was too fierce for him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through to the king of Edom, but they could not prevail. So he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him, and offered him as a burnt offering on the city wall. And there was great fury against the Israelites, so they withdrew and returned to their own land. 2 Kings chapter 4. Now the wife of one of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord. And now his creditor is coming to take my 2 children as his slaves. How can I help you? Asked Elisha. Tell me, what do you have in the house? She answered, Your servant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil. Go, said Elisha, borrow jars, even empty ones, from all your neighbors. Do not gather just a few. Then go inside, shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour oil into all these jars, setting the full ones aside. So she left him, and after she had shut the door behind her and her sons, they kept bringing jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, Bring me another. But he replied, There are no more jars. Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, Go, sell the oil and pay your debt. Then you and your sons can live on the remainder. One day Elisha went to Shunem, and a prominent woman who lived there persuaded him to have a meal. So whenever he would pass by, he would stop there to eat. Then the woman said to her husband, "Behold, now I know that the one who often comes our way is a holy man of God. Please let us make a small room upstairs and put in it a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp for him. Then when he comes to us, he can stay there." One day Elisha came to visit and went to his upper room to lie down. And he said to Gehazi his servant, "Call the Shunammite woman." And when he had called her, she stood before him. And Elisha said to Gehazi, "Now tell her, look, you have gone to all this trouble for us. What can we do for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army?" "I have a home among my own people," she replied. So he asked, "Then what should be done for her?" "Well, she has no son," Gehazi replied, "and her husband is old." "Call her," said Elisha. So Gehazi called her, and she stood in the doorway. And Elisha declared, "At this time next year you will hold a son in your arms." "No, my lord," she said, "do not lie to your maidservant, O man of God." But the woman did conceive, and at that time the next year she gave birth to a son, just as Elisha had told her. And the child grew, and one day he went out to his father, who was with the harvesters. My head, he complained to his father. So his father told a servant, "Carry him to his mother." After the servant had picked him up and carried him to his mother, the boy sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God. Then she shut the door and went out. And the woman called her husband and said, "Please send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys, that I may go quickly to the man of God and return." "Why would you go to him today?" he replied. "It is not a new moon or a Sabbath." "Everything is all right," she said. Then she saddled the donkey and told her servant, "Drive onward, do not slow the pace for me unless I tell you." So she set out and went to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her at a distance, he said to his servant Gehazi, "Look, there is the Shunammite woman. Please run out now to meet her and ask, 'Are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is your child all right?'" And she answered, "Everything is all right." When she reached the man of God at the mountain, she clung to his feet. Gehazi came over to push her away, but the man of God said, "Leave her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me." Then she said, "Did I ask you for a son, my lord? Didn't I say, 'Do not deceive me'?" So Elisha said to Gehazi, "Tie up your garment, take my staff in your hand, and go. If you meet anyone, do not greet him, and if anyone greets you, do not answer him. Then lay my staff on the boy's face." And the mother of the boy said, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So he got up and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead of them and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound or response. So he went back to meet Elisha and told him, "The boy has not awakened." When Elisha reached the house, there was the boy lying dead on his bed. So he went in, closed the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. Then Elisha got on the bed and lay on the boy, mouth to mouth, eye to eye, and hand to hand. As he stretched himself out over him, the boy's body became warm. Elisha turned away and paced back and forth across the room. Then he got on the bed and stretched himself out over the boy again, and the boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunammite woman." So he called her, and she came. Then Elisha said, "Pick up your son." She came in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. When Elisha returned to Gilgal, there was a famine in the land. As the sons of the prophets were sitting at his feet, he said to his attendant, "Put on the large pot and boil some stew for the sons of the prophets." One of them went out to the field to gather herbs, and he found a wild vine from which he gathered as many wild gourds as his garment could hold. Then he came back and cut them up into the pot of stew, though no one knew what they were. And they poured it out for the men to eat, but when they tasted the stew, they cried out, "There is death in the pot, O man of God," and they could not eat it. Then Elisha said, "Get some flour." He threw it into the pot and said, "Pour it out for the people to eat," and there was nothing harmful in the pot. Now a man from Baal-Shalisha came to the man of God with a sack of 20 loaves of barley bread from the first ripe grain. "Give it to the people to eat," said Elisha. But his servant asked, "How am I to set 20 loaves before 100 men?" "Give it to the people to eat," said Elisha, "for this is what the Lord says, they will eat and have some left over." So he set it before them, and they ate and had some left over, according to the word of the Lord. 2 Kings chapter 5. Now Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man in his master's sight and highly regarded, for through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. And he was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. At this time the Arameans had gone out in bands and had taken a young girl from the land of Israel, and she was serving Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would go to the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." And Naaman went and told his master what the girl from the land of Israel had said. "Go now," said the king of Aram, "and I will send you with a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman departed, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. And the letter that he took to the king of Israel stated, "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman, so that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and asked, "Am I God, killing and giving life, that this man expects me to cure a leper? Surely you can see that he is seeking a quarrel with me." Now when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Please let the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. Then Elisha sent him a messenger who said, "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be clean." But Naaman went away angry, saying, "I thought that he would surely come out, stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the spot to cure my leprosy. Are not the Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not have washed in them and been cleansed?" So he turned and went away in a rage. Naaman's servants, however, approached him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then, when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So Naaman went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored and became like that of a little child, and he was clean. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God, stood before him, and declared, "Now I know for sure that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel, so please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will not accept it." And although Naaman urged him to accept it, he refused. "If you will not," said Naaman, "please let me, your servant, be given as much soil as a pair of mules can carry, for your servant will never again make a burnt offering or a sacrifice to any other god but the Lord. Yet may the Lord forgive your servant this one thing. When my master goes into the temple of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my arm, and I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord forgive your servant in this matter." "Go in peace," said Elisha. But after Naaman had traveled a short distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha the man of God, said, "Look, my master has spared this Aramean, Naaman, while not accepting what he brought. As surely as the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him." So Gehazi pursued Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running toward him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and asked, "Is everything all right?" "Everything is all right," Gehazi replied. "My master has sent me to say, I have just now discovered that 2 young men from the sons of the prophets have come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothing." But Naaman insisted, "Please take 2 talents," and he urged Gehazi to accept them. Then he tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, along with 2 sets of clothing, and gave them to 2 of his servants, who carried them ahead of Gehazi. When Gehazi came to the hill, he took the gifts from the servants and stored them in the house. Then he dismissed the men, and they departed. When Gehazi went in and stood before his master, Elisha asked him, "Gehazi, where have you been?" "Your servant did not go anywhere," he replied. But Elisha questioned him, "Did not my spirit go with you when the man got down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to accept money and clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and oxen, men servants and maidservants?" Therefore the leprosy of Naaman will cling to you and your descendants forever." And as Gehazi left his presence, he was leprous, as white as snow. 2 Kings chapter 6. Now the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, "Please take note that the place where we meet with you is too small for us. Please let us go to the Jordan, where each of us can get a log so we can build ourselves a place to live there." "Go," said Elisha. Then one of them said, "Please come with your servants." "I will come," he replied. So Elisha went with them, and when they came to the Jordan, they began to cut down some trees. As one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. "Oh, my master," he cried out, "it was borrowed." "Where did it fall?" asked the man of God. And when he showed him the place, the man of God cut a stick, threw it there, and made the iron float. "Lift it out," he said, and the man reached out his hand and took it. Now the king of Aram was at war against Israel. After consulting with his servants, he said, "My camp will be in such and such a place." Then the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, "Be careful passing by this place, for the Arameans are going down there." So the king of Israel sent word to the place the man of God had pointed out. Time and again Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. For this reason the king of Aram became enraged and called his servants to demand of them, "Tell me, which one of us is on the side of the king of Israel?" But one of his servants replied, "No one, my lord the king, for Elisha the prophet in Israel tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom." So the king said, "Go and see where he is, that I may send men to capture him." On receiving the report, "Elisha is in Dothan," the king of Aram sent horses, chariots, and a great army. They went there by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early in the morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. So he asked Elisha, "O my master, what are we to do?" "Do not be afraid," Elisha answered, "for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Then Elisha prayed, "O Lord, please open his eyes, that he may see." And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw that the hills were full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. As the Arameans came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, "Please strike these people with blindness." So he struck them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha. And Elisha told them, "This is not the way, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will take you to the man you are seeking." And he led them to Samaria. When they had entered Samaria, Elisha said, "O Lord, open the eyes of these men, that they may see." Then the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked around and discovered that they were in Samaria. And when the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, "My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" "Do not kill them," he replied. "Would you kill those you have captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them, that they may eat and drink, and then return to their master." So the king prepared a great feast for them, and after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away, and they returned to their master. And the Aramean raiders did not come into the land of Israel again. Some time later, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, assembled his entire army and marched up to besiege Samaria. So there was a great famine in Samaria. Indeed, they besieged the city so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver, and a quarter cab of dove's dung sold for 5 shekels of silver. As the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, "Help me, my lord the king." He answered, "If the Lord does not help you, where can I find help for you? From the threshing floor or the winepress?" Then the king asked her, "What is the matter?" And she answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give up your son that we may eat him, and tomorrow we will eat my son.' So we boiled my son and ate him, and the next day I said to her, 'Give up your son that we may eat him,' but she had hidden her son." When the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes, and as he passed by on the wall, the people saw the sackcloth under his clothes next to his skin. He announced, "May God punish me, and ever so severely, if the head of Elisha son of Shaphat remains on his shoulders through this day." Now Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. The king sent a messenger ahead, but before he arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "Do you see how this murderer has sent someone to cut off my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door to keep him out. Is not the sound of his master's footsteps behind him?" While Elisha was still speaking with them, the messenger came down to him, and the king said, "This calamity is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" 2 Kings chapter 7. Then Elisha said, "Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow at the gate of Samaria, a seah of fine flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley will sell for a shekel." But the officer on whose arm the king leaned answered the man of God, "Look, even if the Lord were to make windows in heaven, could this really happen?" "You will see it with your own eyes," replied Elisha, "but you will not eat any of it." Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate, and they said to one another, "Why just sit here until we die? If we say, 'Let us go into the city,' we will die there from the famine in the city, but if we sit here, we will also die. So come now, let us go over to the camp of the Arameans. If they let us live, we will live. If they kill us, we will die." So they arose at twilight and went to the camp of the Arameans. But when they came to the outskirts of the camp, there was not a man to be found. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots, horses, and a great army, so that they said to one another, "Look, the king of Israel must have hired the kings of the Hittites and Egyptians to attack us." Thus the Arameans had arisen and fled at twilight, abandoning their tents and horses and donkeys. The camp was intact, and they had run for their lives. When the lepers reached the edge of the camp, they went into a tent to eat and drink. Then they carried off the silver, gold, and clothing, and went and hid them. On returning, they entered another tent, carried off some items from there, and hid them. Finally they said to one another, "We are not doing what is right. Today is a day of good news. If we are silent and wait until morning light, our sin will overtake us. Now therefore let us go and tell the king's household." So they went and called out to the gatekeepers of the city, saying, "We went to the Aramean camp, and no one was there, not a trace, only tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents were intact." The gatekeepers shouted the news, and it was reported to the king's household. So the king got up in the night and said to his servants, "Let me tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we are starving, so they have left the camp to hide in the field, thinking, 'When they come out of the city, we will take them alive and enter the city.'" But one of his servants replied, "Please have scouts take 5 of the horses that remain in the city. Their plight will be no worse than all the Israelites who are left here. You can see that all the Israelites here are doomed, so let us send them and find out." Then the scouts took 2 chariots with horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army, saying, "Go and see." And they tracked them as far as the Jordan, and indeed the whole way was littered with the clothing and equipment the Arameans had thrown off in haste. So the scouts returned and told the king. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. It was then that a seah of fine flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. Now the king had appointed the officer on whose arm he leaned to be in charge of the gate, but the people trampled him in the gateway, and he died, just as the man of God had foretold when the king had come to him. It happened just as the man of God had told the king. About this time tomorrow at the gate of Samaria 2 seahs of barley will sell for a shekel, and a seah of fine flour will sell for a shekel. And the officer had answered the man of God, "Look, even if the Lord were to make windows in heaven, could this really happen?" So Elisha had replied, "You will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of it." And that is just what happened to him. The people trampled him in the gateway, and he died. 2 Kings chapter 8. Now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Arise, you and your household, go and live as a foreigner wherever you can, for the Lord has decreed a 7-year famine, and it is already come to the land." So the woman had proceeded to do as the man of God had instructed, and she and her household lived as foreigners for 7 years in the land of the Philistines. At the end of 7 years, when the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, she went to the king to appeal for her house and her land. Now the king had been speaking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, "Please relate to me all the great things Elisha has done." And Gehazi was telling the king how Elisha had brought the dead back to life. Just then the woman whose son Elisha had revived came to appeal to the king for her house and her land. So Gehazi said, "My lord the king, this is the woman, and this is the son Elisha restored to life." When the king asked the woman, she confirmed it. So the king appointed for her an officer, saying, "Restore all that was hers, along with all the proceeds of the field from the day that she left the country until now." Then Elisha came to Damascus while Ben-Hadad king of Aram was sick, and the king was told, "The man of God has come here." So the king said to Hazael, "Take a gift in your hand, go to meet the man of God, and inquire of the Lord through him, will I recover from this illness?" So Hazael went to meet Elisha, taking with him a gift of 40 camel loads of every good thing from Damascus. And he went in and stood before him and said, "Your son Ben-Hadad king of Aram has sent me to ask, will I recover from this illness?" Elisha answered, "Go and tell him, you will surely recover, but the Lord has shown me that in fact he will die." Elisha fixed his gaze steadily on him until Hazael became uncomfortable. Then the man of God began to weep. "Why is my Lord weeping?" asked Hazael. "Because I know the evil you will do to the Israelites," Elisha replied. "You will set fire to their fortresses, kill their young men with a sword, dash their little ones to pieces, and rip open their pregnant women." "But how could your servant, a mere dog, do such a monstrous thing?" said Hazael. And Elisha answered, "The Lord has shown me that you will be king over Aram." So Hazael left Elisha and went to his master, who asked him, "What did Elisha say to you?" And he replied, "He told me that you would surely recover." But the next day Hazael took a thick cloth, dipped it in water, and spread it over the king's face. So Ben-Hadad died, and Hazael reigned in his place. In the 5th year of the reign of Joram son of Ahab over Israel, Jehoram son of Jehoshaphat succeeded his father as king of Judah. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. And Jehoram walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done. For he married a daughter of Ahab and did evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet for the sake of his servant David, the Lord was unwilling to destroy Judah, since he had promised to maintain a lamp for David and his descendants forever. In the days of Jehoram, Edom rebelled against the hand of Judah and appointed their own king. So Jehoram crossed over to Zair with all his chariots. When the Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, he rose up and attacked by night. His troops, however, fled to their homes. So to this day Edom has been in rebellion against the hand of Judah. Likewise Libnah rebelled at the same time. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoram, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Jehoram rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David, and his son Ahaziah reigned in his place. In the 12th year of the reign of Joram son of Ahab over Israel, Ahaziah son of Jehoram became king of Judah. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year. His mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. And Ahaziah walked in the ways of the house of Ahab, and did evil in the sight of the Lord, like the house of Ahab, for he was a son-in-law of the house of Ahab. Then Ahaziah went with Joram son of Ahab to fight against Hazael king of Aram at Ramoth-Gilead, and the Arameans wounded Joram. So King Joram returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds that the Arameans had inflicted on him at Ramah, when he fought against Hazael king of Aram. Then Ahaziah son of Jehoram king of Judah went down to Jezreel to visit Joram son of Ahab, because Joram had been wounded. 2 Kings chapter 9. Now Elisha the prophet summoned one of the sons of the prophets, and said to him, "Tuck your cloak under your belt, take this flask of oil, and go to Ramoth-Gilead. When you arrive, look for Jehu son of Jehoshaphat the son of Nimshi. Go in, get him away from his companions, and take him to an inner room. Then take the flask of oil, pour it on his head, and declare, 'This is what the Lord says, I anoint you king over Israel.' Then open the door and run. Do not delay." So the young prophet went to Ramoth-Gilead, and when he arrived, the army commanders were sitting there. "I have a message for you, commander," he said. "For which of us?" asked Jehu. "For you, commander," he replied. So Jehu got up and went into the house, where the young prophet poured the oil on his head and declared, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I anoint you king over the Lord's people Israel, and you are to strike down the house of your master Ahab, so that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets and the blood of all the servants of the Lord shed by the hand of Jezebel. The whole house of Ahab will perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, both slave and free, in Israel. I will make the house of Ahab like the houses of Jeroboam son of Nebat and Baasha son of Ahijah. And on the plot of ground at Jezreel the dogs will devour Jezebel, and there will be no one to bury her." Then the young prophet opened the door and ran. When Jehu went out to the servants of his master, they asked, "Is everything all right? Why did this madman come to you? You know his kind in their babble," he replied. "That is a lie," they said. "Tell us now." So Jehu answered, "He talked to me about this and that, and he said, 'This is what the Lord says, I anoint you king over Israel.'" Quickly each man took his garment and put it under Jehu on the bare steps. Then they blew the ram's horn and proclaimed, "Jehu is king." Thus Jehu son of Jehoshaphat the son of Nimshi conspired against Joram. Now Joram and all Israel had been defending Ramoth-Gilead against Hazael king of Aram, but King Joram had returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds he had suffered at the hands of the Arameans in the battle against Hazael their king. So Jehu said, "If you commanders wish to make me king, then do not let anyone escape from the city to go and tell it in Jezreel." Then Jehu got into his chariot and went to Jezreel, because Joram was laid up there, and Ahaziah king of Judah had gone down to see him. Now the watchman standing on the tower in Jezreel saw Jehu's troops approaching, and he called out, "I see a company of troops. Choose a rider," Joram commanded. "Send him out to meet them, and ask, 'Have you come in peace?'" So a horseman rode off to meet Jehu and said, "This is what the king asks, 'Have you come in peace?'" "What do you know about peace?" Jehu replied. "Fall in behind me." And the watchman reported, "The messenger reached them, but he is not coming back." So the king sent out a second horseman, who went to them and said, "This is what the king asks, 'Have you come in peace?'" "What do you know about peace?" Jehu replied. "Fall in behind me." Again the watchman reported, "He reached them, but he is not coming back. And the charioteer is driving like Jehu son of Nimshi. He is driving like a madman." "Harness!" Joram shouted, and they harnessed his chariot. Then Joram king of Israel and Ahaziah king of Judah set out, each in his own chariot, and met Jehu on the property of Naboth the Jezreelite. When Joram saw Jehu, he asked, "Have you come in peace, Jehu?" "How can there be peace," he replied, "as long as the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound?" Joram turned around and fled, calling out to Ahaziah, "Treachery, Ahaziah!" Then Jehu drew his bow and shot Joram between the shoulders. The arrow pierced his heart, and he slumped down in his chariot. And Jehu said to Bidkar his officer, "Pick him up and throw him into the field of Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember that when you and I were riding together behind his father Ahab, the Lord lifted up this burden against him. As surely as I saw the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons yesterday, declares the Lord, so will I repay you on this plot of ground, declares the Lord. Now then, according to the word of the Lord, pick him up and throw him on the plot of ground." When King Ahaziah of Judah saw this, he fled up the road toward Beth-Hagan. And Jehu pursued him, shouting, "Shoot him too." So they shot Ahaziah in his chariot on the ascent of Gur near Ibleam, and he fled to Megiddo and died there. Then his servants carried him by chariot to Jerusalem and buried him with his fathers in his tomb in the city of David. In the 11th year of Joram son of Ahab, Ahaziah had become king over Judah. Now when Jehu arrived in Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it. So she painted her eyes, adorned her head, and looked down from a window. And as Jehu entered the gate, she asked, "Have you come in peace, O Zimri, murderer of your master?" He looked up at the window and called out, "Who is on my side? Who?" And 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him. "Throw her down," yelled Jehu. So they threw her down, and her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses as they trampled her underfoot. Then Jehu went in and ate and drank. "Take care of this cursed woman," he said, "and bury her, for she was the daughter of a king." But when they went out to bury her, they found nothing but her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands. So they went back and told Jehu, who replied, "This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke through his servant Elijah the Tishbite. On the plot of ground at Jezreel the dogs will devour the flesh of Jezebel, and Jezebel's body will lie like dung in the field on the plot of ground at Jezreel, so that no one can say, 'This is Jezebel.'" 2 Kings chapter 10. Now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria to the officials of Jezreel, to the elders, and to the guardians of the sons of Ahab, saying, When this letter arrives, since your master's sons are with you, and you have chariots and horses, a fortified city and weaponry, select the best and most worthy son of your master, set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. But they were terrified and reasoned, If 2 kings could not stand against him, how can we? So the palace administrator, the overseer of the city, the elders, and the guardians sent a message to Jehu. We are your servants, and we will do whatever you say. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever is good in your sight. Then Jehu wrote them a second letter and said, If you are on my side, and if you will obey me, then bring the heads of your master's sons to me at Jezreel by this time tomorrow. Now the sons of the king, 70 in all, were being brought up by the leading men of the city. And when the letter arrived, they took the sons of the king and slaughtered all 70 of them. They put their heads in baskets and sent them to Jehu at Jezreel. When the messenger arrived, he told Jehu, They have brought the heads of the sons of the king. And Jehu ordered, Pile them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until morning. The next morning Jehu went out and stood before all the people and said, You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him. But who killed all these? Know then that not a word the Lord has spoken against the house of Ahab will fail, for the Lord has done what he promised through his servant Elijah. So Jehu killed everyone in Jezreel who remained of the house of Ahab, as well as all his great men and close friends and priests, leaving him without a single survivor. Then Jehu set out toward Samaria. At Beth-eked of the shepherds, Jehu met some relatives of Ahaziah king of Judah and asked, Who are you? We are relatives of Ahaziah, they answered, and we have come down to greet the sons of the king and of the queen mother. Then Jehu ordered, Take them alive. So his men took them alive, then slaughtered them at the well of Beth-eked, 42 men. He spared none of them. When he left there, he found Jehonadab, son of Rechab, who was coming to meet him. Jehu greeted him and asked, Is your heart as true to mine as my heart is to yours? It is, Jehonadab replied. If it is, said Jehu, give me your hand. So he gave him his hand, and Jehu helped him into his chariot, saying, Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. So he had him ride in his chariot. When Jehu came to Samaria, he struck down everyone belonging to Ahab who remained there, until he had destroyed them, according to the word that the Lord had spoken to Elijah. Then Jehu brought all the people together and said, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him a lot. Now therefore summon to me all the prophets of Baal, all his servants and all his priests. See that no one is missing, for I have a great sacrifice for Baal. Whoever is missing will not live. But Jehu was acting deceptively in order to destroy the servants of Baal. And Jehu commanded, Proclaim a solemn assembly for Baal. So they announced it. Then Jehu sent word throughout Israel, and all the servants of Baal came. There was not a man who failed to show. They entered the temple of Baal, and it was filled from end to end. And Jehu said to the keeper of the wardrobe, Bring out garments for all the servants of Baal. So he brought out garments for them. Next Jehu and Jehonadab son of Rechab entered the temple of Baal, and Jehu said to the servants of Baal, Look around to see that there are no servants of the Lord here among you, only servants of Baal. And they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had stationed 80 men outside and warned them, If anyone allows one of the men I am delivering into your hands to escape, he will forfeit his life for theirs. When he had finished making the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guards and officers, Go in and kill them, do not let anyone out. So the guards and officers put them to the sword, threw the bodies out, and went into the inner room of the temple of Baal. They brought out the sacred pillar of the temple of Baal and burned it. They also demolished the sacred pillar of Baal. Then they tore down the temple of Baal and made it into a latrine, which it is to this day. Thus Jehu eradicated Baal from Israel, but he did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat had caused Israel to commit, the worship of the golden calves at Bethel and Dan. Nevertheless the Lord said to Jehu, Because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my sight, and have done to the house of Ahab all that was in my heart, 4 generations of your sons will sit on the throne of Israel." Yet Jehu was not careful to follow the instruction of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. In those days the Lord began to reduce the size of Israel. Hazael defeated the Israelites throughout their territory from the Jordan eastward through all the land of Gilead, the region of Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh, and from Aroer by the Arnon Valley through Gilead to Bashan. As for the rest of the acts of Jehu, along with all his accomplishments and all his might, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehu rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria. And his son Jehoahaz reigned in his place. So the duration of Jehu's reign over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. 2 Kings chapter 11. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to annihilate all the royal heirs. But Jehosheba, daughter of King Joram, the sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the sons of the king who were being murdered. She put him and his nurse in a bedroom to hide him from Athaliah, and he was not killed. And Joash remained hidden with his nurse in the house of the Lord for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled the land. Then in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent for the commanders of hundreds, the Kerites, and the guards, and had them brought into the house of the Lord. There he made a covenant with them and put them under oath. He showed them the king's son and commanded them, "This is what you are to do. A third of you who come on duty on the Sabbath shall guard the royal palace. A third shall be at the gate of Sur, and a third at the gate behind the guards. You are to take turns guarding the temple. The 2 divisions that would go off duty on the Sabbath are to guard the house of the Lord for the king. You must surround the king with weapons in hand, and anyone who approaches the ranks must be put to death. You must stay close to the king wherever he goes." So the commanders of hundreds did everything that Jehoiada the priest had ordered. Each of them took his men, those coming on duty on the Sabbath and those going off duty, and came to Jehoiada the priest. Then the priest gave to the commanders of hundreds the spears and shields of King David from the house of the Lord. And the guards stood with weapons in hand surrounding the king by the altar and the temple, from the south side to the north side of the temple. Then Jehoiada brought out the king's son, put the crown on him, presented him with a testimony, and proclaimed him king. They anointed him, and the people clapped their hands and declared, "Long live the king." When Athaliah heard the noise from the guards and the people, she went out to the people in the house of the Lord. And she looked out and saw the king standing by the pillar according to the custom. The officers and trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Then Athaliah tore her clothes and screamed, "Treason! Treason!" And Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders of hundreds in charge of the army, "Bring her out between the ranks, and put to the sword anyone who follows her." For the priest had said, "She must not be put to death in the house of the Lord." So they seized Athaliah as she reached the horses' entrance to the palace grounds, and there she was put to death. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they would be the Lord's people. He also made a covenant between the king and the people. So all the people of the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and idols to pieces, and they killed Mattan the priest of Baal in front of the altars. And Jehoiada the priest posted guards for the house of the Lord. He took with him the commanders of hundreds, the Kerites, the guards, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king down from the house of the Lord and entered the royal palace by way of the gate of the guards. Then Joash took his seat on the royal throne, and all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet because Athaliah had been put to the sword at the royal palace. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. 2 Kings chapter 12. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. His mother's name was Zibiah. She was from Beersheba. And Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the days he was instructed by Jehoiada the priest. Nevertheless, the high places were not removed. The people continued sacrificing and burning incense there. Then Joash said to the priests, "Collect all the money brought as sacred gifts into the house of the Lord, the census money, the money from vows, and the money brought voluntarily into the house of the Lord. Let every priest receive it from his constituency, and let it be used to repair any damage found in the temple." By the 23rd year of the reign of Joash, however, the priests had not yet repaired the damage to the temple. So King Joash called Jehoiada and the other priests and said, "Why have you not repaired the damage to the temple? Now therefore, take no more money from your constituency, but hand it over for the repair of the temple." So the priests agreed that they would not receive money from the people and that they would not repair the temple themselves. Then Jehoiada the priest took a chest, bored a hole in its lid, and set it beside the altar on the right side as one enters the house of the Lord. There the priests who guarded the threshold put all the money brought into the house of the Lord. Whenever they saw that there was a large amount of money in the chest, the royal scribe and the high priest would go up, count the money brought into the house of the Lord, and tie it up in bags. Then they would put the counted money into the hands of those who supervised the work on the house of the Lord, who in turn would pay those doing the work, the carpenters, builders, masons, and stonecutters. They also purchased timber and dressed stone to repair the damage to the house of the Lord, and they paid the other expenses of the temple repairs. However, the money brought into the house of the Lord was not used for making silver basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, trumpets, or any articles of gold or silver for the house of the Lord. Instead, it was paid to those doing the work, and with it they repaired the house of the Lord. No accounting was required from the men who received the money to pay the workmen, because they acted with integrity. The money from the guilt offerings and sin offerings was not brought into the house of the Lord. It belonged to the priests. At that time, Hazael, king of Aram, marched up and fought against Gath and captured it. Then he decided to attack Jerusalem. So King Joash of Judah took all the sacred objects dedicated by his fathers, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, the kings of Judah, along with his own consecrated items and all the gold found in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the royal palace, and he sent them to Hazael, king of Aram. So Hazael withdrew from Jerusalem. As for the rest of the acts of Joash, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And the servants of Joash rose up and formed a conspiracy and killed him at Beth-Millo on the road down to Silla. His servants Jozabad son of Shimeath and Jehozabad son of Shomer struck him down, and he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and his son Amaziah reigned in his place. 2 Kings chapter 13. In the 23rd year of the reign of Joash son of Ahaziah over Judah, Jehoahaz son of Jehu became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 17 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. So the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he delivered them continually into the hands of Hazael king of Aram and his son Ben-Hadad. Then Jehoahaz sought the favor of the Lord, and the Lord listened to him because he saw the oppression that the king of Aram had inflicted on Israel. So the Lord gave Israel a deliverer, and they escaped the power of the Arameans. Then the people of Israel lived in their own homes as they had before. Nevertheless, they did not turn away from the sins that the house of Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit, but they continued to walk in them. The Asherah pole even remained standing in Samaria. Jehoahaz had no army left except 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers, because the king of Aram had destroyed them and made them like the dust at threshing. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoahaz, along with all his accomplishments and his might, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehoahaz rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria, and his son Jehoash reigned in his place. In the 37th year of the reign of Joash over Judah, Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 16 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not turn away from all the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat had caused Israel to commit, but he walked in them. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoash, along with all his accomplishments and his might, including his war against Amaziah king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehoash rested with his fathers, and Jeroboam succeeded him on the throne. Jehoash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. When Elisha had fallen sick with the illness from which he would die, Jehoash king of Israel came down to him and wept over him, saying, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." Elisha told him, "Take a bow and some arrows." So Jehoash took a bow and some arrows. Then Elisha said to the king of Israel, "Put your hand on the bow." So the king put his hand on the bow, and Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. "Open the east window," said Elisha. So he opened it, and Elisha said, "Shoot." So he shot. And Elisha declared, "This is the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram, for you shall strike the Arameans in Aphek until you have put an end to them." Then Elisha said, "Take the arrows." So he took them, and Elisha said to the king of Israel, "Strike the ground." So he struck the ground 3 times and stopped. But the man of God was angry with him and said, "You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck down Aram until you had put an end to it. But now you will strike down Aram only 3 times. And Elisha died and was buried. Now the Moabite raiders used to come into the land every spring. Once, as the Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders, so they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. And as soon as his body touched the bones of Elisha, the man was revived and stood up on his feet. And Hazael king of Aram oppressed Israel throughout the reign of Jehoahaz. But the Lord was gracious to Israel and had compassion on them, and he turned toward them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And to this day the Lord has been unwilling to destroy them or cast them from his presence. When Hazael king of Aram died, his son Ben-Hadad reigned in his place. Then Jehoash son of Jehoahaz took back from Ben-Hadad son of Hazael the cities that Hazael had taken in battle from his father Jehoahaz. Jehoash defeated Ben-Hadad 3 times, and so recovered the cities of Israel. 2 Kings chapter 14. In the 2nd year of the reign of Jehoash son of Jehoahaz over Israel, Amaziah son of Joash became king of Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Jehoaddan. She was from Jerusalem. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father David had done. He did everything as his father Joash had done. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away, and the people continued sacrificing and burning incense on the high places. As soon as the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, Amaziah executed the servants who had murdered his father the king. Yet he did not put the sons of the murderers to death, but acted according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, where the Lord commanded, "Fathers must not be put to death for their children, and children must not be put to death for their fathers. Each is to die for his own sin." Amaziah struck down 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. He took Selah in battle and called it Joktheel, which is its name to this very day. Then Amaziah sent messengers to the king of Israel, Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu. "Come, let us meet face to face," he said. But Jehoash, king of Israel, replied to Amaziah, king of Judah, "A thistle in Lebanon sent a message to a cedar in Lebanon, saying, 'Give your daughter to my son in marriage.' Then a wild beast in Lebanon came along and trampled the thistle. You have indeed defeated Edom, and your heart has become proud. Glory in that, and stay at home. Why should you stir up trouble so that you fall, you and Judah with you?" But Amaziah would not listen, and Jehoash king of Israel advanced. He and King Amaziah of Judah faced each other at Bethshemesh in Judah. And Judah was routed before Israel, and every man fled to his home. There at Bethshemesh, Jehoash king of Israel captured Amaziah king of Judah, the son of Joash, the son of Ahaziah. Then Jehoash went to Jerusalem and broke down the wall of Jerusalem from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate, a section of 400 cubits. He took all the gold and silver and all the articles found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace, as well as some hostages. Then he returned to Samaria. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoash, along with his accomplishments, his might, and how he waged war against Amaziah king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehoash rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and his son Jeroboam reigned in his place. Amaziah son of Joash, king of Judah, lived for 15 years after the death of Jehoash son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel. As for the rest of the acts of Amaziah, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And conspirators plotted against Amaziah in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. But men were sent after him to Lachish, and they killed him there. They carried him back on horses and buried him in Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. Then all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in place of his father Amaziah. Azariah was the one who rebuilt Elath and restored it to Judah after King Amaziah rested with his fathers. In the 15th year of the reign of Amaziah, son of Joash, over Judah, Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 41 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not turn away from all the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. This Jeroboam restored the boundary of Israel from Lebo-Hamath to the sea of the Arabah, according to the word that the Lord, the God of Israel, had spoken through his servant Jonah, son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath-hepher. For the Lord saw that the affliction of the Israelites, both slave and free, was very bitter. There was no one to help Israel. And since the Lord had said that he would not blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash. As for the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, along with all his accomplishments and might, and how he waged war and recovered both Damascus and Hamath for Israel from Judah, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jeroboam rested with his fathers, the kings of Israel, and his son Zechariah reigned in his place. 2 Kings chapter 15. In the 27th year of Jeroboam's reign over Israel, Azariah son of Amaziah became king of Judah. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother's name was Jechaliah. She was from Jerusalem. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away. The people continued sacrificing and burning incense there. And the Lord afflicted the king with leprosy until the day he died, so that he lived in a separate house, while his son Jotham had charge of the palace and governed the people of the land. As for the rest of the acts of Azariah, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Azariah rested with his fathers and was buried near them in the city of David, and his son Jotham reigned in his place. In the 38th year of Azariah's reign over Judah, Zechariah son of Jeroboam became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 6 months. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, as his fathers had done. He did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat had caused Israel to commit. Then Shallum son of Jabesh conspired against Zechariah, struck him down, and killed him in front of the people, and reigned in his place. As for the rest of the acts of Zechariah, they are indeed written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel. So the word of the Lord spoken to Jehu was fulfilled. 4 generations of your sons will sit on the throne of Israel. In the 39th year of Uzziah's reign over Judah, Shallum son of Jabesh became king, and he reigned in Samaria 1 full month. Then Menahem son of Gadai went up from Tirzah to Samaria, struck down and killed Shallum son of Jabesh, and reigned in his place. As for the rest of the acts of Shallum, along with the conspiracy he led, they are indeed written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel. At that time Menahem, starting from Tirzah, attacked Tiphsah and everyone in its vicinity, because they would not open their gates. So he attacked Tiphsah and ripped open all the pregnant women. In the 39th year of Azariah's reign over Judah, Menahem son of Gadai became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 10 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and throughout his reign he did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat had caused Israel to commit. Then Pul, king of Assyria, invaded the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver in order to gain his support and strengthen his own grip on the kingdom. Menahem exacted this money from each of the wealthy men of Israel, 50 shekels of silver from each man, to give to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria withdrew and did not remain in the land. As for the rest of the acts of Menahem, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Menahem rested with his fathers, and his son Pekahiah reigned in his place. In the 50th year of Azariah's reign over Judah, Pekahiah, son of Menahem, became king of Israel, and reigned in Samaria 2 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat had caused Israel to commit. Then his officer, Pekah son of Remaliah, conspired against him along with Argob, Ariah, and 50 men of Gilead, and at the citadel of the king's palace in Samaria, Pekah struck down and killed Pekahiah and reigned in his place. As for the rest of the acts of Pekahiah, along with all his accomplishments, they are indeed written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. In the 52nd year of Azariah's reign over Judah, Pekah son of Remaliah became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 20 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam son of Nebat had caused Israel to commit. In the days of Pekah king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria came and captured Ijon, Abel-Beth-Maachah, Genoa, Kedesh, Hazor, Gilead, and Galilee, including all the land of Naphtali, and he took the people as captives to Assyria. Then Hoshea son of Elah led a conspiracy against Pekah son of Remaliah. In the 20th year of Jotham son of Uzziah, Hoshea attacked Pekah, killed him, and reigned in his place. As for the rest of the acts of Pekah, along with all his accomplishments, they are indeed written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. In the 2nd year of the reign of Pekah son of Remaliah over Israel, Jotham son of Uzziah became king of Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother's name was Jerusha, daughter of Zadok. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzziah had done. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away. The people continued sacrificing and burning incense there. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the house of the Lord. As for the rest of the acts of Jotham, along with his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? In those days the Lord began to send Rezin king of Aram and Pekah son of Remaliah against Judah. And Jotham rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David his father, and his son Ahaz reigned in his place. 2 Kings chapter 16. In the 17th year of Pekah son of Remaliah, Ahaz son of Jotham became king of Judah. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. And unlike David his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. Instead, he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, and even sacrificed his son in the fire, according to the abominations of the nations that the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. And he sacrificed and burned incense on the high places, on the hills, and under every green tree. Then Rezin king of Aram and Pekah son of Remaliah king of Israel came up to wage war against Jerusalem. They besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him. At that time Rezin king of Aram recovered Elath for Aram, drove out the men of Judah, and sent the Edomites into Elath, where they live to this day. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. Come up and save me from the hands of the kings of Aram and Israel, who are rising up against me. Ahaz also took the silver and gold found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's palace, and he sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria responded to him, marched up to Damascus, and captured it. He took its people to Kir as captives and put Rezin to death. Then King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria. On seeing the altar in Damascus, King Ahaz sent Uriah the priest a model of the altar and complete plans for its construction. And Uriah the priest built the altar according to all the instructions King Ahaz had sent from Damascus, and he completed it by the time King Ahaz had returned. When the king came back from Damascus and saw the altar, he approached it and presented offerings on it. He offered his burnt offering and his grain offering, poured out his drink offering, and sprinkled the blood of his peace offerings on the altar. He also took the bronze altar that stood before the Lord from the front of the temple, between the new altar and the house of the Lord, and he put it on the north side of the new altar. Then King Ahaz commanded Uriah the priest, Offer on the great altar the morning burnt offering, the evening grain offering, and the king's burnt offering and grain offering, as well as the burnt offerings, grain offerings, and drink offerings of all the people of the land. Sprinkle on the altar all the blood of the burnt offerings and sacrifices, but I will use the bronze altar to seek guidance. So Uriah the priest did just as King Ahaz had commanded. King Ahaz also cut off the frames of the movable stands and removed the bronze basin from each of them. He took down the sieve from the bronze oxen that were under it and put it on a stone base. And on account of the king of Assyria, he removed the Sabbath canopy they had built in the temple and closed the royal entryway outside the house of the Lord. As for the rest of the acts of Ahaz, along with his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Ahaz rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David, and his son Hezekiah reigned in his place. 2 Kings chapter 17. In the 12th year of the reign of Ahaz over Judah, Hoshea son of Elah became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 9 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like the kings of Israel who preceded him. Shalmaneser king of Assyria attacked him, and Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria discovered that Hoshea had conspired to send envoys to King So of Egypt, and that he had not paid tribute to the king of Assyria as in previous years. Therefore the king of Assyria arrested Hoshea and put him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded the whole land, marched up to Samaria, and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and carried away the Israelites to Assyria, where he settled them in Halah, in Gozan by the Habor River, and in the cities of the Medes. All this happened because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh king of Egypt. They had worshipped other gods and walked in the customs of the nations that the Lord had driven out before the Israelites, as well as in the practices introduced by the kings of Israel. The Israelites secretly did things against the Lord their God that were not right. From watchtower to fortified city they built high places in all their cities. They set up for themselves sacred pillars and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every green tree. They burned incense in all the high places like the nations that the Lord had driven out before them. They did wicked things, provoking the Lord to anger. They served idols, although the Lord had told them, "You shall not do this thing." Yet through all his prophets and seers the Lord warned Israel and Judah, saying, "Turn from your wicked ways and keep my commandments and statutes according to the entire law that I commanded your fathers and delivered to you through my servants the prophets." But they would not listen, and they stiffened their necks like their fathers, who did not believe the Lord their God. They rejected his statutes and the covenant he had made with their fathers, as well as the decrees he had given them. They pursued worthless idols and themselves became worthless, going after the surrounding nations that the Lord had commanded them not to imitate. They abandoned all the commandments of the Lord their God and made for themselves 2 cast idols of calves and an Asherah pole. They bowed down to all the host of heaven and served Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire and practiced divination and soothsaying. They devoted themselves to doing evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. So the Lord was very angry with Israel, and he removed them from his presence. Only the tribe of Judah remained, and even Judah did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God, but lived according to the customs Israel had introduced. So the Lord rejected all the descendants of Israel. He afflicted them and delivered them into the hands of plunderers until he had banished them from his presence. When the Lord had torn Israel away from the house of David, they made Jeroboam son of Nebat king, and Jeroboam led Israel away from following the Lord and caused them to commit a great sin. The Israelites persisted in all the sins that Jeroboam had committed and did not turn away from them. Finally, the Lord removed Israel from his presence, as he had declared through all his servants the prophets. So Israel was exiled from their homeland into Assyria, where they are to this day. Then the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and settled them in the towns of Samaria to replace the Israelites. They took possession of Samaria and lived in its towns. Now when the settlers first lived there, they did not worship the Lord, so he sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So they spoke to the king of Assyria, saying, "The peoples that you have removed and placed in the cities of Samaria do not know the requirements of the God of the land. Because of this he has sent lions among them, which are indeed killing them off." Then the king of Assyria commanded, "Send back one of the priests you carried off from Samaria, and have him go back to live there and teach the requirements of the God of the land." Thus one of the priests they had carried away came and lived in Bethel, and he began to teach them how they should worship the Lord. Nevertheless, the people of each nation continued to make their own gods in the cities where they had settled, and they set them up in the shrines that the people of Samaria had made on the high places. The men of Babylon made Succoth-Benoth. The men of Cuth made Nergal. The men of Hamath made Ashima. The Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak. And the Sepharvites burned their children in the fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. So the new residents worshiped the Lord, but they also appointed for themselves priests of all sorts to serve in the shrines of the high places. They worshiped the Lord, but they also served their own gods according to the customs of the nations from which they had been carried away. To this day they are still practicing their former customs. None of them worship the Lord or observe the statutes, ordinances, laws, and commandments that the Lord gave the descendants of Jacob, whom he named Israel. For the Lord had made a covenant with the Israelites and commanded them, "Do not worship other gods or bow down to them. Do not serve them or sacrifice to them. Instead, worship the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt with great power and an outstretched arm. You are to bow down to him and offer sacrifices to him. And you must always be careful to observe the statutes, ordinances, laws, and commandments he wrote for you. Do not worship other gods. Do not forget the covenant I have made with you. Do not worship other gods, but worship the Lord your God, and he will deliver you from the hands of all your enemies." But they would not listen, and they persisted in their former customs. So these nations worshiped the Lord, but also served their idols, and to this day their children and grandchildren continue to do as their fathers did. 2 Kings chapter 18. In the 3rd year of the reign of Hoshea son of Elah over Israel, Hezekiah son of Ahaz became king of Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places, shattered the sacred pillars, and cut down the Asherah poles. He also demolished the bronze snake called Nehushtan that Moses had made, for up to that time the Israelites had burned incense to it. Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. No king of Judah was like him, either before him or after him. He remained faithful to the Lord and did not turn from following him. He kept the commandments that the Lord had given Moses. And the Lord was with Hezekiah, and he prospered wherever he went. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and refused to serve him. He defeated the Philistines as far as Gaza and its borders, from watchtower to fortified city. In the 4th year of Hezekiah's reign, which was the 7th year of the reign of Hoshea son of Elah over Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years the Assyrians captured it. So Samaria was captured in the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of Hoshea king of Israel. The king of Assyria exiled the Israelites to Assyria and settled them in Halah, in Gozan by the Habor River, and in the cities of the Medes. This happened because they did not listen to the voice of the Lord their God, but violated his covenant, all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded, and would neither listen nor obey. In the 14th year of Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked and captured all the fortified cities of Judah. So Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent word to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, "I have done wrong. Withdraw from me, and I will pay whatever you demand from me." And the king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. At that time Hezekiah stripped the gold with which he had plated the doors and doorposts of the temple of the Lord, and he gave it to the king of Assyria. Nevertheless, the king of Assyria sent the Tartan, the Rabsaris, and the Rabshakeh, along with a great army, from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. They advanced up to Jerusalem and stationed themselves by the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Then they called for the king, and Eliakim son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna the scribe, and Joas son of Asaph the recorder went out to them. The Rabshakeh said to them, "Tell Hezekiah that this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. What is the basis of this confidence of yours? You claim to have a strategy and strength for war, but these are empty words. In whom are you now trusting that you have rebelled against me? Look now, you are trusting in Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff that will pierce the hand of anyone who leans on it. Such is Pharaoh king of Egypt to all who trust in him. But if you say to me, We trust in the Lord our God, is he not the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, You must worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Now therefore make a bargain with my master the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses, if you can put riders on them. For how can you repel a single officer among the least of my master's servants when you depend on Egypt for chariots and horsemen? So now was it apart from the Lord that I have come up against this place to destroy it? The Lord himself said to me, Go up against this land and destroy it. Then Eliakim son of Hilkiah, along with Shebna and Joah, said to the Rabshakeh, Please speak to your servants in Aramaic, since we understand it. Do not speak with us in Hebrew in the hearing of the people on the wall. But the Rabshakeh replied, Has my master sent me to speak these words only to you and your master, and not to the men sitting on the wall who are destined with you to eat their own dung and drink their own urine? Then the Rabshakeh stood and called out loudly in Hebrew, Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king says, Do not let Hezekiah deceive you. He cannot deliver you from my hand. Do not let Hezekiah persuade you to trust in the Lord when he says, The Lord will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for this is what the king of Assyria says, Make peace with me and come out to me. Then every one of you will eat from his own vine and his own fig tree and drink water from his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, so that you may live and not die. But do not listen to Hezekiah, for he misleads you when he says, The Lord will deliver us. Has the God of any nation ever delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah? Have they delivered Samaria from my hand? Who among all the gods of these lands has delivered his land from my hand? How then can the Lord deliver Jerusalem from my hand? But the people remained silent and did not answer a word, for Hezekiah had commanded, Do not answer him. Then Hilkiah's son Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shebna the scribe, and Asaph's son Joah the recorder came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn, and they relayed to him the words of the Rabshakeh. 2 Kings chapter 19. On hearing this report, King Hezekiah tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and entered the house of the Lord. And he sent Eliakim the palace administrator, Shebna the scribe, and the leading priests, all wearing sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah son of Amoz, to tell him, This is what Hezekiah says, Today is a day of distress, rebuke, and disgrace. For children have come to the point of birth, but there is no strength to deliver them. Perhaps the Lord your God will hear all the words of the Rabshakeh, whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to defy the living God, and he will rebuke him for the words that the Lord your God has heard. Therefore lift up a prayer for the remnant that still survives. So the servants of King Hezekiah went to Isaiah, who replied, Tell your master that this is what the Lord says. Do not be afraid of the words you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Behold, I will put a spirit in him, so that he will hear a rumor and return to his own land, where I will cause him to fall by the sword. When the Rabshakeh heard that the king of Assyria had left Lachish, he withdrew and found the king fighting against Libnah. Now Sennacherib had been warned about Tirhakah king of Cush. Look, he has set out to fight against you. So Sennacherib again sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying, Give this message to Hezekiah king of Judah. Do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you by saying that Jerusalem will not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Surely you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all the other countries, devoting them to destruction. Will you then be spared? Did the gods of the nations destroyed by my fathers rescue those nations, the gods of Gozan, Haran, and Rezeph, and of the people of Eden in Telasar? Where are the kings of Hamath, Arpad, Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah? So Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers, read it, and went up to the house of the Lord and spread it out before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord, O Lord, God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You made the heavens and the earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. Listen to the words that Sennacherib has sent to defy the living God. Truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste these nations and their lands. They have cast their gods into the fire and destroyed them, for they were not gods, but only wood and stone, the work of human hands. And now, O Lord our God, please save us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, O Lord, are God. Then Isaiah, son of Amoz, sent a message to Hezekiah. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I have heard your prayer concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria. This is the word that the Lord has spoken against him. The virgin daughter of Zion despises you and mocks you. The daughter of Jerusalem shakes her head behind you. Whom have you taunted and blasphemed? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your eyes in pride? Against the Holy One of Israel. Through your servants you have taunted the Lord, and you have said, With my many chariots I have ascended to the heights of the mountains, to the remote peaks of Lebanon. I have cut down its tallest cedars, the finest of its cypresses. I have reached its farthest outposts, the densest of its forests. I have dug wells and drunk foreign waters. With the soles of my feet I have dried up all the streams of Egypt. Have you not heard? Long ago I ordained it. In days of old I planned it. Now I have brought it to pass that you should crush fortified cities into piles of rubble. Therefore their inhabitants, devoid of power, are dismayed and ashamed. They are like plants in the field, tender green shoots, grass on the rooftops, scorched before it is grown. But I know you're sitting down, you're going out and coming in, and you're raging against me. Because your rage and arrogance against me have reached my ears, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth. I will send you back the way you came. And this will be a sign to you, O Hezekiah. This year you will eat what grows on its own, and in the second year what springs from the same. But in the third year you will sow and reap, you will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. And the surviving remnant of the house of Judah will again take root below and bear fruit above. For a remnant will go forth from Jerusalem, and survivors from Mount Zion. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. So this is what the Lord says about the king of Assyria. He will not enter this city or shoot an arrow into it. He will not come before it with a shield or build up a siege ramp against it. He will go back the way he came, and he will not enter this city, declares the Lord. I will defend this city and save it for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David. And that very night the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 men in the camp of the Assyrians. When the people got up the next morning, there were all the dead bodies. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and withdrew. He returned to Nineveh and stayed there. One day, while he was worshipping in the temple of his god Nisroch, his sons Adramelech and Sharezer put him to the sword and escaped to the land of Ararat. And his son Esarhaddon reigned in his place. 2 Kings chapter 20. In those days Hezekiah became mortally ill. The prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, came to him and said, This is what the Lord says, Put your house in order, for you are about to die, you will not recover. Then Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord, saying, Please, O Lord, remember how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion. I have done what was good in your sight. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. Before Isaiah had left the middle courtyard, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Go back and tell Hezekiah, the leader of my people, that this is what the Lord, the God of your father David, says. I have heard your prayer. I have seen your tears. I will surely heal you. On the third day from now you will go up to the house of the Lord. I will add 15 years to your life, and I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. I will defend this city for my sake and for the sake of my servant David. Then Isaiah said, Prepare a poultice of figs. So they brought it and applied it to the boil, and Hezekiah recovered. Now Hezekiah had asked Isaiah, What will be the sign that the Lord will heal me, and that I will go up to the house of the Lord on the third day? And Isaiah had replied, This will be a sign to you from the Lord, that he will do what he has promised. Would you like the shadow to go forward 10 steps or back 10 steps? It is easy for the shadow to lengthen 10 steps, answered Hezekiah, but not for it to go back 10 steps. So Isaiah the prophet called out to the Lord, and he brought the shadow back the 10 steps it had descended on the stairway of Ahaz. At that time Merodach-Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a gift to Hezekiah, for he had heard about Hezekiah's illness. And Hezekiah received the envoys and showed them all that was in his treasure house, the silver, the gold, the spices, and the precious oil, as well as his armory, all that was found in his storehouses. There was nothing in his palace or in all his dominion that Hezekiah did not show them. Then the prophet Isaiah went to King Hezekiah and asked, "Where did those men come from, and what did they say to you?" "They came from a distant land," Hezekiah replied, "from Babylon." "What have they seen in your palace?" Isaiah asked. "They have seen everything in my palace," answered Hezekiah. "There is nothing among my treasures that I did not show them." Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of the Lord. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your fathers have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord, and some of your descendants, your own flesh and blood, will be taken away to be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." But Hezekiah said to Isaiah, "The word of the Lord that you have spoken is good," for he thought, "Will there not at least be peace and security in my lifetime?" As for the rest of the acts of Hezekiah, along with all his might, and how he constructed the pool and the tunnel to bring water into the city, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Hezekiah rested with his fathers, and his son Manasseh reigned in his place. 2 Kings chapter 21. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. His mother's name was Hephzibah, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord by following the abominations of the nations that the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. For he rebuilt the high places that his father Hezekiah had destroyed, and he raised up altars for Baal. He made an Asherah pole, as King Ahab of Israel had done, and he worshipped and served all the host of heaven. Manasseh also built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, "In Jerusalem I will put my name." In both courtyards of the house of the Lord he built altars to all the host of heaven. He sacrificed his own son in the fire, practiced sorcery and divination, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did great evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Manasseh even took the carved Asherah pole he had made and set it up in the temple, of which the Lord had said to David and his son Solomon, "In this temple and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will establish my name forever. I will never again cause the feet of the Israelites to wander from the land that I gave to their fathers, if only they are careful to do all that I have commanded them, the whole law that my servant Moses commanded them." But the people did not listen, and Manasseh led them astray, so that they did greater evil than the nations that the Lord had destroyed before the Israelites. And the Lord spoke through his servants the prophets, saying, "Since Manasseh king of Judah has committed all these abominations, acting more wickedly than the Amorites who preceded him, and with his idols has caused Judah to sin, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Behold, I am bringing such calamity upon Jerusalem and Judah that the news will reverberate in the ears of all who hear it. I will stretch out over Jerusalem the measuring line used against Samaria and the plumb line used against the house of Ahab, and I will wipe out Jerusalem as one wipes out a bowl, wiping it and turning it upside down. So I will forsake the remnant of my inheritance and deliver them into the hands of their enemies, and they will become plunder and spoil to all their enemies, because they have done evil in my sight and have provoked me to anger from the day their fathers came out of Egypt until this day. Moreover, Manasseh shed so much innocent blood that he filled Jerusalem from end to end, in addition to the sin that he had caused Judah to commit, doing evil in the sight of the Lord. As for the rest of the acts of Manasseh, along with all his accomplishments and the sin that he committed, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Manasseh rested with his fathers and was buried in his palace garden, the garden of Uzzah, and his son Amon reigned in his place. Amon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 2 years. His mother's name was Meshullemeth, daughter of Herez. She was from Jotbah. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, as his father Manasseh had done. He walked in all the ways of his father, and he served and worshipped the idols his father had served. He abandoned the Lord, the God of his fathers, and did not walk in the way of the Lord. Then the servants of Ammon conspired against him and killed the king in his palace. But the people of the land killed all those who had conspired against King Ammon, and they made his son Josiah king in his place. As for the rest of the acts of Ammon, along with his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And he was buried in his tomb in the garden of Uzzah, and his son Josiah reigned in his place. 2 Kings chapter 22. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. His mother's name was Jedidah, daughter of Adaiah. She was from Bozkath. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and walked in all the ways of his father David. He did not turn aside to the right or to the left. Now in the 18th year of his reign, King Josiah sent the scribe Shaphan, son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam, to the house of the Lord, saying, Go up to Hilkiah the high priest, and have him count the money that has been brought into the house of the Lord, which the doorkeepers have collected from the people. And let them deliver it into the hands of the supervisors of those doing the work on the house of the Lord, who in turn are to give it to the workmen repairing the damages to the house of the Lord, to the carpenters, builders, and masons, to buy timber and dressed stone to repair the temple. But they need not account for the money put into their hands, since they are working with integrity. Then Hilkiah the high priest said to Shaphan the scribe, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. And he gave it to Shaphan, who read it. And Shaphan the scribe went to the king and reported, Your servants have paid out the money that was found in the temple, and have put it into the hands of the workers and supervisors of the house of the Lord. Moreover, Shaphan the scribe told the king, Hilkiah the priest has given me a book. And Shaphan read it in the presence of the king. When the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes, and commanded Hilkiah the priest, Ahikam son of Shaphan, Achbor son of Micaiah, Shaphan the scribe, and Azariah the servant of the king, Go and inquire of the Lord for me, for the people, and for all Judah concerning the words in this book that has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that burns against us, because our fathers have not obeyed the words of this book by doing all that is written about us. So Hilkiah the priest, Ahikam, Achbor, Shaphan, and Azariah went and spoke to Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, son of Tikvah, the son of Harhas, the keeper of the wardrobe. She lived in Jerusalem in the 2nd district. And Huldah said to them, This is what the Lord the God of Israel says. Tell the man who sent you that this is what the Lord says. I am about to bring calamity on this place and on its people, according to all the words of the book that the king of Judah has read. Because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. My wrath will be kindled against this place and will not be quenched. But as for the king of Judah who sent you to inquire of the Lord, tell him that this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. As for the words that you heard, because your heart was tender and you humbled yourself before the Lord when you heard what I spoke against this place and against its people, that they would become a desolation and a curse, and because you have torn your clothes and wept before me, I have heard you, declares the Lord. Therefore I will indeed gather you to your fathers, and you will be gathered to your grave in peace. Your eyes will not see all the calamity that I will bring on this place. So they brought her answer back to the king. 2 Kings chapter 23. Then the king summoned all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem, and he went up to the house of the Lord with all the people of Judah and Jerusalem, as well as the priests and the prophets, all the people, small and great. And in their hearing he read all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of the Lord. So the king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to follow the Lord and to keep his commandments, decrees, and statutes with all his heart and all his soul, and to carry out the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people entered into the covenant. Then the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest, the priests second in rank, and the doorkeepers to remove from the temple of the Lord all the articles made for Baal, Asherah, and all the host of heaven. And he burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and carried their ashes to Bethel. Josiah also did away with the idolatrous priests ordained by the kings of Judah to burn incense on the high places of the cities of Judah and in the places all around Jerusalem, those who had burned incense to Baal, to the sun and moon, to the constellations, and to all the host of heaven. He brought the Asherah pole from the house of the Lord to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem, and there he burned it, ground it to powder, and threw its dust on the graves of the common people. He also tore down the quarters of the male shrine prostitutes that were in the house of the Lord, where the women had woven tapestries for Asherah. Then Josiah brought all the priests from the cities of Judah and desecrated the high places from Geba to Beersheba, where the priests had burned incense. He tore down the high places of the gates at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which was to the left of the city gate. Although the priests of the high places did not come up to the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, they ate unleavened bread with their fellow priests. He also desecrated Topheth in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so that no one could sacrifice his son or daughter in the fire to Molech. And he removed from the entrance to the house of the Lord the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun. They were in the court near the chamber of an official named Nathan-Melech, and Josiah burned up the chariots of the sun. He pulled down the altars that the kings of Judah had set up on the roof near the upper chambers of Ahaz, and the altars that Manasseh had set up in the 2 courtyards of the house of the Lord. The king pulverized them there and threw their dust into the Kidron Valley. The king also desecrated the high places east of Jerusalem, to the south of the Mount of Corruption, which King Solomon of Israel had built for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians, for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. He smashed the sacred pillars to pieces, cut down the Asherah poles, and covered the sites with human bones. He even pulled down the altar at Bethel, the high place set up by Jeroboam son of Nebat, who had caused Israel to sin. Then he burned the high place, ground it to powder, and burned the Asherah pole. And as Josiah turned, he saw the tombs there on the hillside, and he sent someone to take the bones out of the tombs, and he burned them on the altar to defile it, according to the word of the Lord proclaimed by the man of God who had foretold these things. Then the king asked, "What is this monument I see?" And the men of the city replied, "It is the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and pronounced these things that you have done to the altar of Bethel." "Let him rest," said Josiah. "Do not let anyone disturb his bones." So they left his bones undisturbed, along with those of the prophet who had come from Samaria. Just as Josiah had done at Bethel, so also in the cities of Samaria he removed all the shrines of the high places set up by the kings of Israel, who had provoked the Lord to anger. On the altars he slaughtered all the priests of the high places, and he burned human bones on them. Then he returned to Jerusalem. The king commanded all the people, "Keep the Passover of the Lord your God, as it is written in this book of the covenant." No such Passover had been observed from the days of the judges who had governed Israel through all the days of the kings of Israel and Judah. But in the 18th year of Josiah's reign, this Passover was observed to the Lord in Jerusalem. Furthermore, Josiah removed the mediums and spiritists, the household gods and idols, and all the abominations that were seen in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem. He did this to carry out the words of the law written in the book that Hilkiah the priest had found in the house of the Lord. Neither before nor after Josiah was there any king like him, who turned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his strength, according to all the law of Moses. Nevertheless, the Lord did not turn away from the fury of his burning anger, which was kindled against Judah because of all that Manasseh had done to provoke him to anger. For the Lord had said, "I will remove Judah from my sight, just as I removed Israel. I will reject this city Jerusalem, which I chose, and the temple of which I said, My name shall be there." As for the rest of the acts of Josiah, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? At the end of Josiah's reign, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, marched up to help the king of Assyria at the Euphrates River. King Josiah went out to confront him, but Necho faced him and killed him at Megiddo. From Megiddo his servants carried his body in a chariot, brought him to Jerusalem, and buried him in his own tomb. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, anointed him, and made him king in place of his father. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah. She was from Libnah. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, just as his fathers had done. And Pharaoh Necho imprisoned Jehoahaz at Riblah in the land of Hamath, so that he could not reign in Jerusalem. And he imposed on Judah a levy of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Then Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim son of Josiah king in place of his father Josiah, and he changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim. But Necho took Jehoahaz and carried him off to Egypt, where he died. So Jehoiakim paid the silver and gold to Pharaoh Necho, but to meet Pharaoh's demand he taxed the land and exacted the silver and the gold from the people, each according to his wealth. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Zebidah, daughter of Pedaiah. She was from Rumah. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, just as his fathers had done. 2 Kings chapter 24. During Jehoiakim's reign, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, invaded. So Jehoiakim became his vassal for 3 years, until he turned and rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. And the Lord sent Chaldean, Aramean, Moabite, and Ammonite raiders against Jehoiakim in order to destroy Judah, according to the word that the Lord had spoken through his servants the prophets. Surely this happened to Judah at the Lord's command, to remove them from his presence because of the sins of Manasseh and all that he had done, and also for the innocent blood he had shed, for he had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and the Lord was unwilling to forgive. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Jehoiakim rested with his fathers, and his son Jehoiakim reigned in his place. Now the king of Egypt did not march out of his land again, because the king of Babylon had taken all his territory from the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates River. Jehoiakim was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. His mother's name was Nehushta, daughter of Elnathan. She was from Jerusalem. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, just as his father had done. At that time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched up to Jerusalem, and the city came under siege. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to the city while his servants were besieging it. Jehoiakim, king of Judah, his mother, his servants, his commanders, and his officials all surrendered to the king of Babylon. So in the 8th year of his reign the king of Babylon took him captive. As the Lord had declared, Nebuchadnezzar also carried off all the treasures from the house of the Lord and the royal palace, and he cut into pieces all the gold articles that Solomon king of Israel had made in the temple of the Lord. He carried into exile all Jerusalem, all the commanders and mighty men of valor, all the craftsmen and metalsmiths, 10,000 captives in all. Only the poorest people of the land remained. Nebuchadnezzar carried away Jehoiakim to Babylon, as well as the king's mother, his wives, his officials, and the leading men of the land. He took them into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. The king of Babylon also brought into exile to Babylon all 7,000 men of valor and 1,000 craftsmen and metalsmiths, all strong and fit for battle. Then the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, Jehoiakim's uncle, king in his place, and changed his name to Zedekiah. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah. She was from Libnah. And Zedekiah did evil in the sight of the Lord, just as Jehoiakim had done. For because of the anger of the Lord, all this happened in Jerusalem and Judah, until he finally banished them from his presence. And Zedekiah also rebelled against the king of Babylon. 2 Kings chapter 25. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his entire army. They encamped outside the city and built a siege wall all around it. And the city was kept under siege until King Zedekiah's 11th year. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city was so severe that the people of the land had no food. Then the city was breached, and though the Chaldeans had surrounded the city, all the men of war fled by night by way of the gate between the 2 walls near the king's garden. They headed toward the Arabah, but the army of the Chaldeans pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho, and all his army was separated from him. The Chaldeans seized the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where he pronounced judgment on him. And they slaughtered the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. Then they put out his eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon. On the 7th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign over Babylon, Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, entered Jerusalem. He burned down the house of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem, every significant building. and the whole army of the Chaldeans under the captain of the guard broke down the walls around Jerusalem. Then Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, carried into exile the people who remained in the city, along with the deserters who had defected to the king of Babylon and the rest of the population. But the captain of the guard left behind some of the poorest of the land to tend the vineyards and fields. Moreover, the Chaldeans broke up the bronze pillars and stands and the bronze sea in the house of the Lord, and they carried the bronze to Babylon. They also took away the pots, shovels, wick trimmers, dishes, and all the articles of bronze used in the temple service. The captain of the guard also took away the censers and sprinkling bowls, anything made of pure gold or fine silver. As for the 2 pillars, the sea, and the movable stands that Solomon had made for the house of the Lord, the weight of the bronze from all these articles was beyond measure. Each pillar was 18 cubits tall. The bronze capital atop one pillar was 3 cubits high, with a network of bronze pomegranates all around. The second pillar with its network was similar. The captain of the guard also took away Seraiah the chief priest, Zephaniah the priest of second rank, and the 3 doorkeepers. Of those still in the city he took a court official who had been appointed over the men of war, as well as 5 royal advisers. He also took the scribe of the captain of the army who had enlisted the people of the land, and 60 men who were found in the city. Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, took them and brought them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. There at Riblah, in the land of Hamath, the king of Babylon struck them down and put them to death. So Judah was taken into exile away from its own land. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, appointed Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, over the people he had left behind in the land of Judah. When all the commanders of the armies and their men heard that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah as governor, they came to Gedaliah at Mizpah. Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, Johanan, son of Kareah, Seraiah, son of Tanhumeth the Netophathite, and Jaazaniah, son of the Maacathite, as well as their men. And Gedaliah took an oath before them and their men, assuring them, "Do not be afraid of the servants of the Chaldeans. Live in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and it will be well with you." In the 7th month, however, Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, the son of Elishama, who was a member of the royal family, came with 10 men and struck down and killed Gedaliah, along with the Judeans and Chaldeans who were with him at Mizpah. Then all the people, small and great, together with the commanders of the army, arose and fled to Egypt for fear of the Chaldeans. On the 27th day of the 12th month of the 37th year of the exile of Judah's king Jehoiakim, in the year Evil-Merodach became king of Babylon, he released King Jehoiakim of Judah from prison. And he spoke kindly to Jehoiakim and set his throne above the thrones of the other kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiakim changed out of his prison clothes, and he dined regularly at the king's table for the rest of his life. And the king provided Jehoiakim a daily portion for the rest of his life.